Chapter 4585. Xiaohua had no choice but to follow the thunderclap immortal into the space and take out the thing he had obtained earlier. As expected, the thunderclap immortal's eyes lit up when he saw the bamboo joint that condensed the long river. He raised his hand almost without hesitation and took the bamboo joint in his hand. After he released his spirit sense, he looked at it carefully for a while and said with a smile, "There is a long river sealed in this thing. The aura of this long river is not from an ordinary realm. If I'm not mistaken, it has something to do with the wisp of purple gas that I obtained earlier. I will refine this bamboo joint, and the aura of the long river will be integrated into my body. It will be similar to the effect of fellow Taoist taking the clear feather pill. Haha, many thanks, fellow Taoist." The thunderbolt immortal spat out lightning from his mouth and swallowed the bamboo joint. A clear stream gushed out from the top of the thunderbolt immortal's head like a fountain. It then turned around and fell down. As the clear stream flickered, an indescribable fluctuation merged with the thunderbolt immortal's body. "I's going to meditate." The thunderbolt immortal's face lit up as he said, "In these 50 years, I have put in a lot of effort. It's time for I to rest." The thunderbolt immortal sat down cross-legged in the space and started refining the bamboo joint with all his might. "And fellow Taoist has worked hard." Xiaohua cupped his fist and said, "Leave the rest to I." Xiaohua thought of something and asked, "How is His Highness Lan doing these days?" The thunderbolt immortal naturally didn't answer Xiaohua's question. He passed the information he knew to Xiaohua and ignored him. Xiaohua's face turned gloomy when he received the thunderbolt immortal's information. If he didn't know His Highness Lan's thoughts, he might have thought that His Highness Lan was selfish and wanted to expand his strength. However, if he knew His Highness Lan's thoughts, then His Highness Lan's actions were really thought-provoking. Alright. Xiaohua instantly thought of the scene when he had seen the Grand Mist Ancestor in the illusion when he had left the Star Moon Palace. A sharp glint flashed across his eyes and he said coldly, "People often say that a mountain cannot hold two tigers. This Xiao believed it before, but now, I'm afraid it's true. Since it's like this, Grand Mist Ancestor, bring it on. This Xiao doesn't mind playing with you. Who doesn't know how to cast a long line to catch a big fish?" Now that he had a plan, Xiaohua unleashed his powerful Mahayana stage aura, and the entire sky began to churn. Several huge tornadoes gathered in the sky like holes, stirring up the originally clear sky. Bursts of thunderous rumbles spread out in all directions as Xiaohua flew toward the soaring Dragon Mountain range and the Yu province faster than the wind. There was no need to wait for the soaring Dragon Mountain range. Boom, boom, boom. Several hundred thunderous booms resounded from the soaring Dragon Mountain range. Countless lightning bolts shot up into the sky, shaking the earth. Two giant lightning boats, several 100,000 Fortune Gate's Iron Army, and millions of Fortune Gate's low-level disciples emerged from the soaring Dragon Mountain range to welcome them. They spread out over 1,000 li in the sky. Xiaohua usually didn't like etiquette, but seeing his own disciples' imposing manner, he was also happy in his heart. How could he blame him? His figure blurred, and he teleported in front of everyone. Before he could say anything, Fujiwen and the other disciples led them to kneel on the ground and shouted, "Disciples respectfully welcome Taoists back to the sect. Good, you've all worked hard." Xiaohua's eyes flashed like lightning as he looked around. Even though all the disciples were kneeling, they could clearly feel Xiaohua's gaze on them. They couldn't help but feel excited, and they couldn't help but reply, "Disciples didn't work hard. And wait here and follow this old man back to the Fortune Dao Palace. This old man will reward you according to your contributions." Xiaohua smiled as he raised his hand. He didn't use any divine ability. None of the disciples dared to disobey. They stood up and replied in unison, "Disciples obey. Thank you, Taoist." As Xiaohua flew up, Fujiwen and the other disciples of the Fortune Gate, as well as the disciples of the soaring Dragon Mountain range led by Li Xiang and Fujiwen, returned to the Fortune Dao Palace in an orderly manner. They arranged themselves neatly around the Fortune Dao Palace and formed a capital star formation to protect Xiaohua. Xiaohua sat on the jade chair on the high platform and raised his hand to pat the top of his head. Rumble. Tens of thousands of lightning bolts poured out from the top of his head, shooting into the sky. The roof of the Fortune Dao Palace and the capital star formation of the soaring Dragon Mountain range couldn't stop it. These lightning bolts condensed into a huge storm in the sky. Not only did it shine brightly, but it also pierced through the clouds. The sound of thunder that could vanquish all evil even enveloped the sky for tens of thousands of li. The lightning storm spewed out from the top of Xiaohua's head, and after it flowed in the sky, it slowly entered Xiaohua's body. It flowed endlessly, and Xiaohua's voice resounded in the lightning storm. Xian Songzi, Daoist Jingting, Wang Baifei, Yu Zhongquan and Chong Yuan, listen up. Disciple is here. The 5 of them didn't dare to delay, and they hurriedly stepped out and bowed respectfully. Each of you will lead 50,000 Fortune Gate disciples and split into 4 directions. Head to the 3 continents to welcome the Fortune Gate disciples coming out from the Star Moon Palace. There are 8,111 Golden Core Realm disciples, and 3,607 Foundation Establishment Realm disciples participating in the Star Moon Palace's training. Not a single one of them can be missing. Whoever dares to harm my Fortune Gate disciples will be killed. Yes, disciple understands. Xian Songzi and the others immediately stood up and led the 200,000 disciples out of the soaring Dragon Mountain range, heading to the 3 continents' 4 directions. It wasn't just Xian Songzi and the others. Even the other disciples who had flown far away turned their heads to look at the clouds. Thunderous roars could be heard, and thousands of strange phenomena appeared amidst the wind and thunder. An unparalleled sense of pride rose from the bottom of their hearts. The human race's Mahayana realm, the supreme cultivator of the 3 continents, should have such an imposing manner. 200,000 disciples accepted the order and left. The soaring Dragon Mountain range became somewhat empty. Xiaohua looked all around for a moment and his gaze fell on Li Xiang and His Highness Lan. Li Xiang didn't expect Xiaohua to return with such a valiant aura. He was so excited that his face became somewhat red. Li Xiang, Prince Lan. Xiaohua smiled and said, the 2 of you have worked hard. Tell me about the situation in the past 200 years, and let Fujiwen and the others learn from you. Disciple doesn't dare to claim credit. Li Xiang and Prince Lan were startled, and hurriedly stepped out from the ranks. This is what disciples should do. What the soaring Dragon Mountain range was like in the past, and what it is like now, this old man knows better than the 2 of you. Xiaohua waved his hand and said, tell me how the Fortune Gate has developed in the past few years. Yes, master. Hearing this, His Highness Lan agreed and began to tell Xiongyi everything that happened after Xiaohua left. Although His Highness Lan's story was no different from Xiongyi's, for some reason, perhaps because of Xiaohua's suspicion, Xiaohua always felt that His Highness Lan wanted to take all the credit for himself. Without waiting for Prince Lan to finish, Xiaohua sighed in his heart. First impressions are the strongest. Really amazing, ah. After Prince Lan finished speaking, Li Xiang added a few more words. Finally, Li Xiang took out a jade eye from his bosom and respectfully handed it over to Xiongyi. This disciple knows that master will be back soon. This is the list that this disciple and junior brother Lan recently made. Inside it are the rewards for the inner sect disciples that the 2 of us have discussed. Originally, we should wait for junior brother Xiongyi to return before the 3 of us take a look. Since master has returned first, please take a look and decide how to reward us. Prince Lan blanked for a second, then smiled and said, this is something that disciple casually mentioned a few years ago. Disciple didn't expect senior brother Li to make such a detailed list. Disciple has slacked a little. Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. There is no need to be arrogant or inferior. Being able to work together to handle the Fortune Gate's affairs so well is not easy. Xiaohua took the jade eye pendant and casually glanced at it. He then passed it to Prince Lan and said, I'll leave this matter to you. Reward each disciple according to what is written in the jade eye pendant. Don't disappoint them. When Highness Lan saw this, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. Rewarding the disciples was a great opportunity to attract people's hearts. He was originally a little jealous of Xiaohua for snatching this opportunity, but he didn't expect that Xiaohua would actually give this opportunity to him. However, he still declined. Master, this is senior brother Li's draft, you see. Where would he have the time to do this? Ah. Xiaohua laughed. You have received master's teachings, but he hasn't. Master will guide him in his cultivation during this period. Thank you, master. Li Xiang was overjoyed hearing this, and Prince Lan was also happy. Xiaohua asked a few more questions about the Fortune Gate, the hidden immortal mainland, and even the Luoyang Merchant Union before he sent Prince Lan and the other Fortune Gate disciples out, leaving Li Xiang, Fu Jiwen, and the others in the Fortune Dao Palace. Master. Fu Jiwen pondered for a moment, then said, Disciple has a private matter to discuss with Master. Oh, is it urgent? Xiao Hua was surprised and asked casually. This matter is very important, it can't be considered urgent. Fu Jiwen answered honestly, but didn't say what it was, and then wait for a while. Xiao Hua nodded and Fu Jiwen withdrew. Subsequently, Xiao Hua ordered Li Xiang to sit down cross-legged. Then he stretched out a finger and pressed it between Li Xiang's eyebrows. A trace of crystal light entered, and a moment later, Xiao Hua said with satisfaction, Li Xiang, although your cultivation hasn't improved much in the past 200 years, your foundation is very solid, which suits your temperament. Now Master will teach you some secret techniques and give you some pills. You should be able to enter the unity stage soon. Disciple's aptitude is not good, but to be able to receive Master's teachings and enter the unity stage in my lifetime, Disciple has long surpassed Disciple's expectations. Disciple thanks Master for the gift. Li Xiang didn't regret that he could only enter the unity stage. Instead, he was grateful from the bottom of his heart. Give it a tip. And thank you for all your support. Chapter 4586. Seeing that Li Xiang's requirements were not high, not much different from when he was at Black Wind Ridge, Xiao Hua sighed, Li Xiang, every cultivator's path is different, and their achievements are also different. You and Xiong Yi are Master's disciples. Your foundation is indeed a little weak. But don't worry, Master will do his best to arrange some opportunities for you in the future. I hope you will go further and exceed Master's expectations. Moreover, your talent in this life. Xiao Hua originally wanted to reveal some information about reincarnation, but he stopped when he was about to speak. After all, reincarnation was one of the world's mysteries. Xiao Hua didn't have much confidence at this time, so he didn't dare to say this, and caused Li Xiang to be negligent. Li Xiang didn't understand the meaning in Xiao Hua's words, and didn't notice that Xiao Hua didn't mention the real meaning of Prince Lan. He thought that Prince Lan's achievements would be much higher than his. So Li Xiang smiled and said, Master, don't worry, Disciple knows his own weight. Disciple will do his best to take care of the Fortune Gate's affairs for Master. Good. Xiao Hua gave Li Xiang a cultivation technique and medicinal pills, then took out the Kunlun mirror and said, During this time, you can cultivate in the Kunlun paradise. Thank you, Master. Li Xiang was overjoyed, but he didn't forget to say, also, Master, if possible, please consider other foundation establishment and golden core disciples. Let them cultivate in the Kunlun paradise. The Kunlun paradise is different from the three mainlands. Disciples below the nascent soul realm are not suitable to cultivate in there. Xiao Hua smiled and said, however, those disciples in the qi refining realm can be considered. Don't worry, after you cultivate in seclusion, draw up a plan, Master will consider it. Speaking of this, Xiao Hua hesitated again and asked, also, is the Hidden Immortal Mainland's Jade Pavilion conference going to be held soon? Li Xiang was dazed for a moment, then nodded and said, Yes, Master, it will be held in a month's time. Why does Master want Disciple to go to the Jade Pavilion conference? No. Xiao Hua smiled and said, You don't need to think too much about this matter. Master will ask Fujiwen to send a disciple to snatch an Imperial Preceptor's lot. It's not a big matter. Think about the development of our Fortune Gate's outer disciples. After all, it's a little troublesome. Yes, Master. Li Xiang understood Xiao Hua's meaning. After that, Xiao Hua shook the Kunlun mirror and took Li Xiang into the Shunhua continent. He then looked at Fujiwen and frowned. Disciple, didn't Sun Jian promise to persuade immortal Emperor Go Chen? Why is the Immortal Palace sending troops to annihilate my Fortune Gate? He returned to the Immortal Palace before all of you. If you hadn't come back in time, my Fortune Gate's foundation would be in trouble. Fujiwen looked around and said with a smile, Master, this is all in the past. Although General Sun has never explained anything, it is still a matter of the past. But seeing that Martial Uncle Once-You has become an immortal master of the Immortal Palace, we should know that General Sun is also a man of his word. There must be something wrong with this. What? Once you had become an immortal master of the Immortal Palace? When did this happen? Xiaohua was somewhat stunned. Fu Jiwen was also stunned. He smiled apologetically and said, "Could it be that martial uncle Lei Ting didn't tell master?" "He didn't," Xiaohua said with a smile. "He was in a hurry to cultivate. After he escaped into the Kunlun immortal realm, he didn't say anything." "My disciple, tell me about the things that have happened all these years." "Yes, master." Fu Jiwen didn't dare to be negligent. He told Xiaohua about the matters of the 3 continents. In the end, he said, "There is news coming from the continuous merchant union every day. These news are all stored in the Wind Pavilion. Master can go take a look if you have nothing to do." "And master understands." Xiaohua rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "The Confucian cultivators have an immortal master. The Dragon Palace of the 4 Seas is weak, and the Paradise River is rising. This has a deep impact on the 3 continents." "Oh, what about the Buddhist sect? The Sutra-seeking supreme bliss?" Reporting to master, the Sutra-seeking supreme bliss is quite far from the soaring Dragon Mountain range. There isn't much news about the continuous merchant union. However, the Sutra-seeking supreme bliss seems to have reached the hidden immortal mainland. I just don't know when it will end." Fu Jiwen smiled and said, "If master wants to know, disciple will send someone to ask. No need to be deliberate." Xiaohua waved his hand and said, "I'm afraid master doesn't have much time left. Master will only think about you all." "Ah, master." Fu Jiwen was surprised. Then he was overjoyed and shouted, "Congratulations, master, for reaching the peak of the Grand Ascension stage. Previously I was still a little worried, but now I can finally be at ease." "Disciple, what do you mean?" Xiaohua recalled what Fu Jiwen had said earlier, and a bad feeling arose in his heart. He asked curiously, "Master's cultivation. Could it be that it has something to do with the important matter you mentioned?" "Yes, master." Fu Jiwen thought for a while and said, "Immortal Emperor Gochen's 9th princess, Princess Xian, lost half of the Immortal Palace's Heaven's Heart and couldn't take out the Heaven's Heart during the Heaven's Selection Conference. In a fit of rage, Immortal Emperor Gochen imprisoned her in the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal and banished her to the lower realm. It's been nearly 300 years since then." "What? Xin was imprisoned in the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal? Who did you hear that from?" When Xiaohua heard this, his complexion unconsciously changed. He stood up from the jade chair in shock. The originally calm thunderstorm suddenly erupted like a gigantic thunder sword that directly slashed into the blue dome of heaven. Tens of thousands of li to the left of the thunderstorm, the silent thunderstorm crazily expanded, swallowing countless clouds and shattering them into pieces. Fu Jiwen only felt as if the entire world was collapsing. Countless stars dimmed, countless clouds rose and fell. His entire soul and body were like a falling leaf, rapidly spinning without landing. "Master, it's Bai, and who said it?" Fu Jiwen couldn't breathe. He struggled with all his might, barely spitting out a few words from his mouth. Immediately after, Xiaohua made an in sound. As if the heavens and earth were splitting apart, the space around Fu Jiwen had light and darkness, the energy of heaven and earth, and the freedom of rebirth. Fu Jiwen looked at his master in shock. It had only been 50 years since they last met, and he was even more unable to understand his master's realm. The feeling of being a drop in the ocean involuntarily slowly emerged along with the sweat on his back. Xiaohua's figure was like a mountain standing there steadily. His mood was like the thunderstorm in the sky, crazily swaying, unruly sweeping across the horizon. Towards Princess Xian, there was no need to mention the hardships of experiencing life and death together in the profound water palace. There was no need to mention the dreamlike sweetness in the illusory array. There was no need to mention the sorrowful bitterness when the 3 cups of fate ended. Just the tacit understanding between the thumb and the hand that held her hand, and the kiss between life and death in the profound water palace were enough for Xiaohua to plant the seed of love in his heart for Xian. Xiaohua had the cultivation of a Buddhist sect, but he wasn't a Buddha. Xiaohua was a cultivator, but he wasn't an immortal. Even immortals had the love of Suji and Xingyue. So how could Xiaohua not find new feelings after leaving fairy Hongxia for hundreds of thousands of years? Not to mention the hazy feelings between Xiaohua and Princess Xian. It had already become a seed that was growing strong. Xiaohua knew that Princess Xian's heavenly heart was so important that she was willing to be imprisoned in the Heaven's Punishment prison crystal for him. Xiaohua couldn't help but be moved. There was a kind of love called concealment. There was also a kind of love called sacrifice. There was also a kind of love called completion. Xiaohua also wanted to tell Xian that there was a kind of love called commitment. Xiaohua steadied his mind, and his gaze swept across Fujiwen's body like stars. He sat down again and asked in a low voice, "When did Baiyan send the message?" "Master, it's like this." Fujiwen took a deep breath and told Xiaohua about 10 years ago when Baiyan was banished from the Immortal Palace and was stranded near the soaring Dragon Mountain range. He was discovered by a Fortune Gate disciple and brought into the Fortune Dao Palace. In the end, Fujiwen hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "In addition, Baiyan also said that seeing Fujiwen's hesitation, Xiaohua couldn't help but frown. His heart trembled even more and he asked, "What's wrong? Is there any more bad news?" Fujiwen shook his head and replied, "It's not particularly bad news, but the Nangong family seems to have the intention of looting a burning house. They want to take advantage of this opportunity to propose marriage to the Immortal Palace. Their intentions are punishable by death." Xiaohua's eyes narrowed and a chill appeared on his face. Even someone as strong as Fujiwen felt as if snow was falling under the moon. However, until now, the Continuous Merchant Union has not received any news about the marriage between the Nangong family and the Immortal Palace. Fujiwen hurriedly said, "Continuous Merchant Union?" Xiaohua sneered and looked outside the Fortune Dao Palace. He said in a rather lonely voice, "After arriving at the Star Moon Palace, Master found out that the Continuous Merchant Union is just a child. It's too difficult for them to get any news from the Immortal Palace." "Indeed." Fujiwen nodded. After Disciple received the news, Disciple discussed with Baiyan and hurriedly sent the news of the new princess being banished to the lower realm and the Nangong family to the Continuous Merchant Union. The Continuous Merchant Union also spent a lot of money to search, but Disciple has not found any valuable information. Origin stones are not omnipotent. There are some things that cannot be exchanged with origin stones. Xiaohua said indifferently, "The secrets of the Immortal Palace and the 4 great families have been hidden on the hidden Immortal Continent for who knows how many years. It is not something that our Fortune Gate can compare to." Speaking of this, Xiaohua pondered for a moment and said to Fujiwen, "Summon Baiyan and tell Master the results of your discussions over the years." "Yes, Master." Fujiwen flew out of the Fortune Dao Palace. As for Xiaohua, he was sitting on a jade chair, his fingers trembling in the air. He seemed to be forming hand seals but also seemed to be writing some green seal text. His eyebrows furrowed even tighter. After a short while, Baiyan followed Fujiwen to the Fortune Dao Palace. When Xiaohua returned to the soaring Dragon Mountain range and released the thunderstorm from the top of the Fortune Dao Palace, Baiyan had already sensed it. She was shocked. After meeting Xiaohua, she had already told Fujiwen to cultivate with Xiaohua. Moreover, after being banished to the soaring Dragon Mountain range, she had been secretly delighted to see Fujiwen's cultivation. She knew that her prediction was right, but when she saw Xiaohua's Grand Ascension Stage aura again, she still found it hard to calm down. She really did not dare to imagine that in just a few hundred years, Xiaohua could actually stand side by side with Emperor Go Qian and become the supreme cultivator of the human race on the 3 continents. Moreover, she was also shocked by the East Sea Empress scheme. Chapter 4587. When Baiyan entered the Fortune Dao Palace, she glanced around and saw that Xiaohua was the only one sitting in the main hall. Although the Xiaohua in front of her didn't look any different from the previous Xiaohua, Baiyan didn't dare to neglect him. She hurriedly retracted her gaze and followed behind Fujiwen. Lowering her head, she flew to the bottom of the stage and kowtowed. "Servant Baiyan greets Dao Master." Xiaohua was stunned and smiled bitterly. He glanced at Fujiwen and hurriedly helped Baiyan up. A smile appeared on his face as he said, "Baiyan, no need to be so polite. As the saying goes, master and disciple are like father and son. Fujiwen is my disciple and my child. You are his dual cultivation partner and my Fortune Gate's daughter-in-law. You can call him Dao Master in front of others and call him Master in private." "Yes, Master." Baiyan was overjoyed and hurriedly corrected herself. Xiaohua looked at Baiyan and reprimanded Fu Jiwen, "Disciple, you're hiding something. You haven't taught Baiyan the 5 energies unification technique that martial uncle once taught you." Without martial uncle's approval, disciple wouldn't dare. Fu Jiwen's eyes lit up and he hurriedly bowed. "You can teach it yourself. Master will tell you where your martial uncle is." Xiaohua smiled and waved his hand again, taking out some pills and flying them to Fu Jiwen. "These are also for you and Baiyan." "Thank you, master." Fu Jiwen and Baiyan replied at the same time. After the two of them stood up, Xiaohua thought for a moment before taking out a bottle of pills and handing it over to Baiyan. He said, "Baiyan, you were once again banished to the lower realms because of Xian. Master truly feels guilty in his heart. This is a pill used by the female cultivators of the Tao sect. It was personally refined by Master." Wan knew that this was Xiaohua loving the house and its crow. Because of his guilt towards Xian, he once again looked at her in a new light. Her heart warmed. How could she still accept it? Unknowingly, she fell to her knees again and kowtowed as she cried out, "Master, this disciple is Fu Jiwen's wife, and also your daughter-in-law. Right now our family still lacks a princess. This disciple pleads for Master to save the princess. This disciple has experienced the heaven's punishment of the heaven's punishment crystal. I truly know how powerful this heaven's punishment is. This disciple is not sure if Her Highness can survive the most unbearable loneliness in this world. Master, please make a move soon." Xiaohua's face was slightly red as he raised his hand to help Swan and I up again. He said in shame, "Swan and I, get up. It's fine if I didn't know about it before, but now that I know, how can I just stand by and do nothing? Master owes Xian too much. I will not let Xian down in the future." "Thank you, Master." Momo's previous words were actually somewhat threatening Xiaohua, but seeing that Xiaohua didn't care, her heart relaxed, and she was also happy for the new princess. Xiaohua pointed at the jade bottle, and the pill fell into Baiyan's hand. Baiyan didn't say anything else and carefully put it away. "Baiyan, tell me the origin of this matter, as well as the result of your discussion with Jiwen." Xiaohua asked again. "Yes, Master." Baiyan didn't dare to neglect and report it again. But this time what Baiyan said was different from what Fu Jiwen said. Baiyan said more about the new princess's longing for Xiaohua in the immortal palace, as well as the many other princesses' schemes against the new princess. She even spoke about the Heaven's Choice Assembly in detail. And when she talked about the 3 cups of fate, Baiyan's face was full of tears. "Master, actually before I left, this disciple felt that there was something wrong with the princess. It was as if she was going to say goodbye to Master forever. At that time, this disciple even advised Her Highness that although the other half of the heaven's heart was lost, with the full power of the immortal palace, although the 3 continents were big, it was not impossible to find it again. After finding it, it wouldn't be too late to meet Master again. There was no need to meet Master before the punishment." But Her Highness just smiled and didn't answer, only facing the bronze mirror. This disciple had never seen Her Highness without makeup so solemn. A woman will make herself beautiful for her lover. Master, at that time, this disciple knew that Her Highness truly loved Master. Perhaps she was afraid that Master would take some extreme actions after knowing that she was being punished by the heavens, so she wanted to comfort Master in advance. Moreover, when she returned to the immortal palace from the hidden immortal continent, Her Highness couldn't hide her smile. She was simply not afraid of the heavens. At that time, this disciple was scared to death. I was really afraid that Her Highness would have other thoughts, so I tried my best to persuade Her Highness. Afterwards, Her Highness went to the 3 provinces of thunder and lightning to receive the heaven's punishment. The entire immortal palace was on alert. It was said that the heaven's punishment was personally controlled by immortal Emperor Go-chan. Even the Eastern Sea Empress didn't know which prison Her Highness was imprisoned in, let alone where the prison was in the 3 continents. Listening to Baiyan, Xiaohua's mind was also filled with thoughts. Obviously, Princess Xian didn't tell anyone about the whereabouts of the half-heaven's heart. Even at this time, Baiyan didn't know that the immortal palace had already gathered the 5 qi unification method. Of course, Wenchu was also one of the Fortune Gate's secrets. Without Xiaohua's approval, Fu Jiwen didn't dare to casually tell Baiyan about Wenchu, Xiaohua was just a little confused. Since Sun Jian had already returned to the Immortal Palace and when Chu had offered the 5-Qi unification method to the Immortal Palace, Immortal Emperor Gochun probably already knew that Xion's half-heaven's heart had fallen into Xiaohua's hands. In particular, with the 5-Qi unification method, that half-heaven's heart had already lost its effect. Immortal Emperor Gochun imprisoning Xion no longer had any meaning. Xiaohua didn't know why Immortal Emperor Gochun didn't pardon Xion. Bian was very obedient and didn't say much about the Nangong family's marriage proposal. He only said one sentence before continuing. When this disciple woke up from the coma and saw that I was in a strange place, I couldn't help but feel a little nervous. However, after this disciple checked my cultivation, I discovered that my cultivation wasn't crippled like the other Immortal Palace disciples who were banished to the lower realm. This disciple was overjoyed and thought that Empress Dowager was being lenient. However, when this disciple met a Fortune Gate disciple and found out that this was the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range, this disciple suddenly realized. This was clearly Empress Dowager wanting this disciple to deliver a letter to Master. Therefore, this disciple hurriedly went to the mountain gate to look for young Master Fu. But the hateful thing was. Fu Jiwen coughed and said, Bian picked the main point. It's fine. Xiaohua smiled and said, Bian, just say it. Actually, it's nothing much. Bian smiled and said, the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range's Fortune Gate disciple was different from what this disciple had imagined. The disciple guarding the array was actually a little arrogant and insisted that this disciple take out their palace master land's handwritten order before they were willing to let this disciple pass. Oh, even a 4th grade Essence Force master like you is so arrogant. Xiaohua wasn't surprised and asked with a smile. That's right. Bian answered. At that time, the Fortune Gate disciples had just killed several dozen Wen sages and were full of arrogance. This disciple, a 4th grade Essence Force master, was not in their eyes at all. And then? Xiaohua nodded, acknowledging Bian's complaint and asked again. This disciple has plenty of ways to deal with this kind of disciple. Bian answered. I gave them some benefits and said some threats. I also reported the names of Lu Yi, Wang Bianfei, and the others that young Master Fu had mentioned to this disciple earlier. Coincidentally, Wang Bianfei was inside the mountain gate, and after reporting, this disciple naturally entered the Fortune Gate. And what did you discuss with Jiwen? Xiaohua closed his eyes, and his expression was indifferent as he asked. Bian glanced at Fu Jiwen and signaled him with his eyes, indicating that this was the time for Fu Jiwen to perform. Fu Jiwen helplessly shook his head and said, Master, this disciple and Bian have discussed and felt that there are 2 difficulties in rescuing Her Highness. The first difficulty is to find the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal, and the second difficulty is to find a place with innate restrictions and destroy the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal. The second one is considered the easiest and the first one is the most difficult. Because even the East Sea Empress doesn't know where the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal is, I'm afraid that in the entire Immortal Palace, only the 3 lightning provinces have records of this. Therefore, if Master wants to rescue Her Royal Highness, he must first enter the 3 provinces of Leitang. Bian said that the 3 provinces of Leitang are in charge of punishment and are heavily guarded. It is impossible for ordinary people to get close. However, Her Royal Highness is very familiar with the 3 provinces of Leitang. Old man Sun Yu is an important minister in the 3 provinces of Leitang. If Master can meet Sun Yu, he may be able to get some information. But if Master wants to enter the 3 lightning provinces, you must first enter the Immortal Palace. But, where is the Immortal Palace? Bian doesn't know, and Gusu Chodi probably doesn't know either. Ordinary scholarly families also don't know. If you want to find the way to the Immortal Palace, you can either go through the 4 families Sunjian, or the Star-Picking Tower. Of course, I didn't think that Martial Ant Once-You would enter the Once-You Palace of Literature. If Martial Ant Once-You can cooperate from the inside, it shouldn't be too difficult for Master to enter the Immortal Palace. After passing the most difficult stage, Master just needs to find out where Her Highness Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal is in the 3 lightning provinces. And here General Sun Yu should be able to help. Hearing this, Xiaohua shook his head and said, Since the East Sea Empress can't find out, how can Sun Jian find out? Master, you don't know. Bian smiled and said, The East Sea Empress doesn't know how to find out, but she can't. The Empress is the mother of the world, and she has to be a role model for all the women in the world. She also has to treat the 9 princesses fairly, so she can't find out. And General's son. At this point, Bayan suddenly realized something and said curiously, Master, the Sun Jian that Master is talking about can't be perfected Lord Qing'an of the Sun Palace? He's still alive. Xiao Hua didn't hide it from Bayan. Didn't I say just now? He has already returned to the Immortal Palace. Oh, I understand. Bayan stuck out her tongue and immediately thought of Sun Cho, who had gone to the Hall of Fragrance. She knew why the East Sea Empress had asked her to send a letter to Xiao Hua. It must be because Sun Jian had revealed Xiao Hua's strength. Then Bayan said confidently, before I was demoted, perfected Lord Qing'an was in the Hall of Fragrance. But he was called Sun Cho at that time and he was also in charge of the Sun Palace. I think the East Sea Empress called him to the Hall of Fragrance to find out where Her Highness is. On the other hand, the Empress sent me to the lower realm to send a letter to Master. This way we can work together from the inside. Donate and thank you for all your support. Chapter 4588. N. Xiao Hua nodded and smiled. Since that's the case, I believe Sun Jian's side is also investigating. We should also make preparations. Master will rest for a period of time before going to investigate the location of the Immortal Palace and contact your martial uncle once you. Yes, Master. Fu Jiwen agreed and said, then Disciple. We'll also try to contact the 4 great families and see if I can get some information. And Nangong Jingyin, she actually dares to snatch the princess from Master. We must teach them a lesson. Tao Wu also shouted angrily. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said rather leniently, when Master heard those words just now, I also felt uncomfortable in my heart. However, the Nangong family doesn't know of Master's relationship with the new princess. They wanted to use the new princess' freedom as the price to threaten the Empress. However, the indirect effect was also to let the new princess obtain her freedom. However, their plans were all for naught in the end. That won't do. Tao Wu raised her head and said stubbornly, how can a toad like Nangong Jing covet the princess? Although Master is magnanimous and has telepathy with the princess, Disciple feels uncomfortable just thinking about it. Furthermore, the Nangong family will definitely publicize this matter. Even if the princess marries Master in the future, Master's face won't look good. And Tao Wu is right. Xiao Hua nodded. Jiwen, send Disciple to contact Nangong Pingping of the Nangong family. Tell him that Master has something to say to Nangong Tianjiao. Yes, Disciple understands. Fu Jiwen agreed without thinking. Xiao Hua then explained. Nangong Pingping is the leader of the Nangong family who entered the Star Moon Palace. Master has saved their lives before. Yes, Disciple understands. Fu Jiwen smiled and said, Master has made a trip to the Star Moon Palace. I wonder how many people he has saved. Oh Master, Disciple heard that Zhai Xingzi and Gusu Chodi also entered the Star Moon Palace. Did they have any fortuitous encounters? Tao Wu and Gusu Chodi had a good relationship and naturally thought of the two of them. Her tone was filled with envy. Xiao Hua smiled and said, there are many fortuitous encounters in the world. The Star Moon Palace is just one of them. This time, the Star Moon Palace is different from before. Who knows how many humans and demons have died in there? What is there for you to be envious of? When he spoke up to this point, Xiao Hua looked into the distance and frowned slightly. However, I've already promised Zhai Xingzi and Gusu Chodi in the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm that your martial uncle Wen Chu would go to the Gusu clan on Zhai Xingzi's behalf to propose marriage for Gusu Chodi. Now that he's become the Immortal Palace's Master of Literature Palace, it's quite troublesome. I have to hurry and find your martial uncle Wen Chu. Master. Upon hearing this, Tao Wu hurriedly said, Hey. Fu Jiwen frowned and stopped him. Xiao Hua was puzzled and asked, what's wrong? It's nothing. Fu Jiwen smiled and said, I'm going to wait for Master to come back and get married. After all, if I don't go through the ceremony, I won't be able to be with Momo and have to give her family an explanation. Boom. Hearing these words, Xiao Hua's mind suddenly gave birth to a clap of thunder, and the thunderstorm in the sky once again shook violently. That's right. Xiao Hua lost his voice and said in a low voice, Even Momo and Gusuchodi want a status. Xian is immortal Emperor Go Chen's 9th princess. How can I save her without knowing the truth? Those who know won't say much, but what about those who don't know? What will they think? What will they say? Didn't Fujiwen tell me 2 stories that day? If I don't save Xian openly, if I don't openly propose marriage to the immortal palace, how can I stop everyone's tongues from wagging? How can I give the Nangong family a fair counterattack? Even if Xian doesn't care about these things, the immortal palace cares about these things, this Zhao's descendants care about these things, and in the future, the Fortune Gate's hundreds of millions of disciples will care about these things. Xiao Hua seemed to be pondering but also seemed to be muttering to himself. He didn't avoid Fujiwen and Fujiwen. When Fujiwen and Tao Wu heard this, shock appeared on their faces. At the same time, Tao Wu was so excited that his face turned red. He grabbed Fujiwen's hand and stared fixedly at Xiao Hua. That's right. Xiao Hua had already made his decision. He looked up at Fujiwen and said, now that the immortal palace has obtained the 5 energies origin method, that half of the heavens will has no meaning. Princess Xian's punishment should also have a conclusion. However, this conclusion needs an excuse, and also an explanation for immortal Emperor Go Chun to the world and the other 8 princesses. The Nangong family just happened to give the Eastern Sea Empress this excuse. I'm sure they've already started to prepare and send a letter to the immortal palace. Xian gave me half of the heaven's will to save me that day. After I used it, I had no way of returning it to Xian. This caused Xian to be imprisoned in the heaven's punishment prison crystal. Since Xian is like this, I can't let her down. I must openly save her. Xian has such deep feelings for me, so I can't let her down. I must announce to the world that I am Xian's true love. I'm prepared to propose marriage to immortal Emperor Go Chan. Ah? After listening to the end, Fujiwen was a bit dumbfounded. This was because he understood Xiao Hua the most and knew that Xiao Hua didn't like to attract attention. Therefore, all his previous thoughts were based on this. It would be best if they didn't reveal anything and quietly rescued the new princess. However, he didn't expect that Xiao Hua would propose marriage to immortal Emperor Go Chan in order to save Princess Xian. Master! Baian was abnormally excited and shouted, your idea is the best. Disciple feels that Her Highness likes it the most. If she knew, she would be so happy to marry Master. However, Disciple still has a small doubt. Speak, Xiao Hua asked. Baian replied, Master, don't forget. The Nangong family proposed marriage first. Moreover, the Eastern Sea Empress has already agreed to the Nangong family. With her temper, she definitely won't go back on her words. If she doesn't say anything, the immortal emperor will definitely agree to the Nangong family's marriage. Now that Master proposes marriage, how can these two agree? After all, it's first come first serve. That's easy. Xiao Hua smiled. Master won't propose marriage first. I'll ask about Princess Xian's whereabouts first and save her before the Nangong family. Then, I'll return to the immortal palace to propose marriage. It's best if we can cook the rice. Fujiwen took the opportunity to shout. Bah! Baian spat but still nodded. This method is the most realistic. No! Xiao Hua smiled. Others can but not Xian. The 9th princess of the immortal emperor must have etiquette above all. Master, you can actually hide on the side and suddenly make a move when the Nangong family saves Xian. Fujiwen reminded again. No. Xiao Hua shook his head. When it comes to saving Xian, you must take the initiative in everything. You can't give anyone a handle. If you want to do it, you have to be the hero who saves the beauty and the lovers finally get married. You have to do it perfectly. That's not right, Master Yu. How can you interrogate immortal Emperor Go Chan? Fujiwen asked curiously. Even if you find the immortal palace, how can he meet you? Master is the supreme cultivator of the human race, equal to the immortal emperor. How can he not meet you? Baian curled his lips and said a few words to Fujiwen. Then he reminded Xiao Hua, however, Master, immortal Emperor Go Chan is the most cunning. I'm afraid you won't be able to outtalk him. You have to think of a plan to interrogate him. Haha, I'm the worst at talking. Xiaohua stretched out his hands, looked at them flashing with lightning and laughed. I'm the best at persuading people with virtue. Master, Fu Jiwen exclaimed, could it be that you want to fight at the Lingyun Palace? Xiaohua rolled his eyes at Fu Jiwen and said, Disciple, I'm going to ask for Xian's whereabouts and then ask for her hand in marriage. If I fight at the Lingyun Palace and trample on Immortal Emperor Go Chen's face, do you think Immortal Emperor Go Chen's temper will be good enough to not care about this and still betroth Xian to me? That's true. Fu Jiwen rubbed his nose and said awkwardly, not to mention Immortal Emperor Go Chen who leads the Confucians, even a rich man with some farmland won't agree. So, Xiaohua smiled and said, with my face as a human Grand Ascension stage master, I'm sure Immortal Emperor Go Chen will tell me if I ask for Xian's whereabouts. Then, I'll rescue Princess Xian and bring her to the Immortal Palace to beg for mercy. Then I'll catch him off guard. What's done can't be undone. Master, Bayan said in disbelief, you're thinking too simply. The Immortal Emperor represents the heavenly prestige. As the saying goes, the heavenly prestige is unpredictable. Maybe he really won't reveal it. Don't forget, even the Imperial Empress doesn't know where the princess is imprisoned. Xiaohua sneered and looked up at the sky. Then there's nothing to say. Xian has treated me so well, I can't let her down. Then I'll destroy the Lingyun Palace. Good, good, good. Bayan jumped up in joy and shouted, attack the Lingyun Palace. We must attack the Lingyun Palace and let the 8 princesses know that the 9th princess's husband is someone who can pierce through the heavens. Let's see who dares to hit us when we're down. Master, you have to think twice. Fu Jiwen looked at the old man and the young man with a wry smile. Neither of them was afraid of making a big deal out of this. Unfortunately, Bayan ignored Fu Jiwen and said anxiously then, Master, if that's the case, I have to contact Marshal Ant Wenchu and hurry to find the Immortal Palace. If we're too late, the Nangong family will take the lead and that will be bad. Attacking the Lingyun Palace is just a preparation. I don't think it'll happen. Of course, if it really does happen, then it'll be the time for our fortune gate to establish our prestige. This is also an opportunity that Immortal Emperor Go Chen has given me. Xiaohua smiled coldly. So there's no need to involve Marshal Ant Wenchu. I have my own plans. How does Master want to find the Immortal Palace? Bayan was a little confused. Give it as a reward and thank you for all your support. Chapter 4589. Master has already asked Li Xiang about it. Xiaohua smiled. The Hidden Immortal Mainland's Jadestich Conference is about to be held in a month. Isn't that a great opportunity? Master, what does the Jadestich Conference have to do with the Immortal Palace? Bayan was even more confused and asked curiously. Disciple knows about the Jadestich Conference. That year, Gusuchodi was still a star monarch. That place is where the guilty officials of the Immortal Palace are punished. Even the Star Monarch Hall's Hall Master wouldn't know about the Immortal Palace's location. Fu Jiwen seemed to have thought of something and asked with a smile, Master, why did you send your disciples to snatch an Imperial Preceptor's lot? Could it be that Master wants to establish a country? Bayan was unhappy that Fu Jiwen changed the topic, but just as she was about to speak, Xiaohua answered, Disciple, do you know about the Xiao country? Of course I know. Fu Jiwen smiled. Disciple had just returned to the Soaring Dragon Mountain range and heard the disciples talking about the Xiao country. Is Master planning to establish a country in the Xiao country? Yes, Xiaohua smiled bitterly. It's not that Master is ambitious, but Master has no choice but to establish a country. Xiaohua then recounted what he had seen and heard in the Xiao country, as well as how Xiong Yi and the others had captured the country's ruler. In the end, he said, instead of letting those Confucian cultivators or Grand Mist Ancestors' subordinates take advantage of the Xiao country, it's better for our fortune gate to do it ourselves. Moreover, didn't Master say it earlier? Xiong Yi and Li Xiang are Fortune Gate's outer disciples, and you are Fortune Gate's inner disciples. Not to mention you, even your subordinates are stronger than Xiong Yi and the others. How do you expect outer disciples to interact with inner disciples? I can imagine how awkward it must be for Li Xiang and Prince Lan to sit on these 2 chairs in front of me when I'm not around. But if I ask you to sit on this chair, you definitely won't be willing. Therefore, Master has decided to send the outer disciples to the Shao country. And Master's plan is good. Fujiwen nodded. One is the Shao country, the hidden immortal mainland's first Dao empire, and the other is the soaring Dragon Mountain range, the hidden immortal mainland's first Dao sect. They can support each other and develop together. Master. Bayan couldn't help but ask, Master, how do you plan to find the immortal palace? Listen carefully, you'll know soon. Xiaohua smiled, then asked Fujiwen, how many imperial preceptors will there be in the Yaotai meeting this time? I'm not sure about that. Fujiwen shook his head and said, after I returned to the mountain, I read the information of the Luoyi Business Alliance. It seems that the last time there were 1,200. This time there will be fewer, but there should be about 800. Why are there so many? Xiaohua asked curiously. Back then, Master had snatched 1 out of 10 and racked his brains. The calamity in the hidden immortal continent has affected the kingdom of Taoism. Almost every day, the kingdom of Taoism is destroyed. Moreover, the interval between the Jadestage gathering has been long. Naturally, there will be more lots for the State Master. Fujiwen said with a smile. However, Master, isn't it better to have more lots for the State Master? Master still can't find the way to the Immortal Palace with these 800 lots? Ah! Hearing this, Bayan finally understood. Xiaohua's idea was really incredible, but it was very feasible. Since the kingdom of Taoism had to be worshipped when the kingdom of Taoism was established, the lot of the State Master had to return to the Sole Official Hall. The Sole Official Hall was in the Immortal Palace, so following the lot of the State Master would naturally lead to the Immortal Palace. Of course, 1 lot of the State Master might not be enough, but what about 10? What about 100? What about 1,000? With Xiaohua's strength as a human Mahayana stage cultivator, he could definitely find the way to the Immortal Palace. In this way, Xiaohua could step into the Immortal Palace's Nantian Gate without relying on any information or contacting Wen Chu. Master, disciple, really admires you. Bayan said only Master can become a human Mahayana stage cultivator, unlike some people who know, but don't say it. After saying that, Bayan pinched Fujiwen's waist. Fujiwen didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly responded with an ouch, to show that he had received Bayan's anger. Xiaohua looked at the young couple, and after a while he said, Bayan used to be an immortal official of the Immortal Palace, so he has considered some things more comprehensively. Jiwen and Bayan, think about this more carefully. We will set off for the Yaotai Mountain in 10 days. Yes, Master. Fujiwen and Bayan bowed and agreed. Also, Jiwen, you take Bayan and your disciples back to the Shenhua continent. Let Bayan take over Xiongyi's matter and investigate the culprit behind the Shao country's Confucian cultivators. You will organize the 100,000 Fortune Gate disciples and accompany Master to the Yaotai Mountain. Yes. Fujiwen agreed and left Bayan in the Fortune Dao Palace while he went to gather his disciples. Bayan, tell Master about Princess Xine. Xiaohua smiled and said, she never mentions anything about the Immortal Palace. This. Feng Xiu was a little embarrassed and said, Master, let's talk about this after you rescue Her Highness. After all, this disciple doesn't know what Her Highness wants to say. If this disciple says something wrong, Her Highness will punish this disciple. Alright. Xiaohua also knew that it was difficult for Yan Cheng. After pondering for a moment he asked, oh right, back then when Master met Princess Xine, she was only around the 4th grade of essence energy. It seems like her strength back then was not comparable to yours. Why is that? At the mention of this, anger immediately appeared on Bayan's face. He said fiercely, isn't it all because of Princess Qingqing of the Jasper Flower Palace? Bayan then told him about Princess Qingqing's plot to frame Princess Xine. In the end, he said, Princess Qingqing is injured and her cultivation is not fully recovered. I heard from the maidservants of the school of the Emperor Star that they once begged the princess to report this matter to the Emperor Immortal. However, the princess felt that the Emperor Immortal was too busy with government affairs and was troubled by the matters of the 4 great clans. If she told the Emperor Immortal would be even angrier, so she didn't say anything. At that time, the princess probably wanted to avoid Princess Qingqing, so she descended to the lower realm. Hearing this, Xiaohua was stunned. He seemed to have thought of something. He looked deeply at Bai and said, Bai, didn't Xan tell you why she went to the Saint River in the Western Paradise? No. Bai asked curiously, why did Her Highness tell this disciple this? Xiao Hua said word by word. When Master met Princess Xan in the Western Paradise, she had invited a Buddhist disciple who was proficient in heaven's feet. She also wanted to invite a Taoist cultivator who was proficient in water escape and formations to the Xianshui Palace at the bottom of the Saint River to save a nephew of hers. She also said that this nephew of hers was suppressed in the Xianshui Palace. How is that possible? Bai didn't care and said casually, Her Highness's nephew. However, at this point Bai suddenly froze. The details of her time with Princess Xan suddenly appeared in her mind. Bai immediately understood. Wasn't the nephew that Princess Xan was talking about her? Bai had never thought that a descendant of an immortal emperor would risk her life to save her in an unknown place when she was seriously injured. Just for that possibility alone. Princess Xan. Bai knelt on the ground and cried as she kowtowed to the sky. Even if this servant's body is smashed to pieces, this servant will still save you from the heaven's punishment prison crystal. Otherwise, this servant won't be able to repay your love for me. Sigh. After Bai finished crying and kowtowing, Xiao Hua helped Bai up and said, Xan is always so considerate of others. She treats you the same way as Master. After hearing so much, she didn't tell you or Master about it. This is the bearing of an immortal emperor's princess. Whether it's you or Master, we can't let her down. Of course, the heavenly Tao is fair as well. If she didn't save you, I'm afraid you wouldn't have been banished to the lower realm to save her. Master, I don't want to eliminate any karma. Momo stopped crying, looked up at the sky and said, I just hope that Master can go to the immortal palace and force out the princess's whereabouts. Teach the arrogant immortal palace a lesson, as well as those immortal officials who hurt the princess. After a while, Fujiwen returned with his disciple. He looked at Bai An's increasingly determined expression in bewilderment and did not ask any questions. Meanwhile, Xiao Hua took out the Kunlun mirror and sent them all into the Shanhua continent. Then he closed his eyes and meditated. The Yaotai Mountain was still the Yaotai Mountain. For thousands of years that bluestone peak was like a jade tablet worshipping an immortal palace. It stood between the heavens and the earth, regardless of whether the wind blew or the rain fell. Regardless of whether the wind was biting cold. Not to mention that Xiao Hua had left for more than 300 years, it was like a blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, nothing had changed on Yaotai Mountain. The mountain was still the same mountain, and the water was still the same water. Even under the Yaotai Mountain, there were still some tents in a radius of nearly 100 miles. Around these tents, there were still many soldiers and generals in bright armor. Those monarchs who were recruiting Tao cultivators were also waiting respectfully for them. However, the current Yaotai Mountain was different from before. Snowflakes were fluttering in the sky, and these snowflakes were different from most places in the hidden immortal continent. The snowflakes were the size of a palm, and looked like white cranes. As the snowflakes fluttered in the air, they danced along the protrusions on both sides. It was very beautiful. However, when the snowflakes fell to the ground, it could be seen clearly. Rather than saying that these snowflakes looked like white cranes, they looked more like 2 palms of yaoju flowers. The yaoju flower was a kind of flower that ordinary Confucian cultivators in the hidden immortal continent liked. The yaoju flower was pure white in color, and had a kind of faint fragrance without makeup. It symbolized the noble and virtuous conduct of Confucian cultivators. Moreover, the petals of the yaoju flower were not round. Instead, they were folded together, just like how Confucian cultivators put their hands together when they saluted. When the wind blew, the yaoju flower swayed as if it was saluting someone. This was the real reason why Yaotai Mountain was famous in the secular world. Chapter 45-90. The strangest thing was that when the snowflakes fell from the Yaotai Mountain, whether it was on the ground or on the mountains, before the snowflakes melted, the closed palms were all facing the same direction. No one knew whether that direction was where the immortal palace was located or not, but everyone knew that even if it wasn't that direction, was it after the Yaotai Mountain became famous? Yaoju snow covered the sky and covered the mountains. In this heavy snow, There were thousands of Taoist cultivators standing quietly in the air. Their eyes flashed as they stared fervently at the Yaotai mountain, waiting for the Yaotai gathering to begin. These cultivators were no different from the cultivators 300 years ago. Although they knew that this was the Immortal Palace's arrangement, they had no choice but to gather here and wait for an opportunity to survive and cultivate. However, in this group of cultivators, there was a mid-nascent soul cultivator who was different from the others. This cultivator had a handsome face and a tall figure. His face carried a kind of indifference and confidence. He didn't look at the Yaotai mountain. Instead, he looked at the nascent soul cultivators in the distance from time to time, as if he was looking for something. Occasionally, a few nascent soul cultivators would notice his gaze and nod at him in acknowledgement. This cultivator was called Ji Chengzi. He was from the Yen province's curved cloud pavilion, and had entered the ranks of nascent soul cultivators 500 years ago. Moreover, Ji Chengzi had also participated in the Yaotai Mountains gathering several hundred years ago. However, this Ji Chengzi had the ability to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. When he attended the banquet held by Reverend Huada, he first raised his cup to Reverend Huada. Then, he was moved by Reverend Qing Su's words. The next day, when the Star Lord Palace's Hall Master Kong Honggu took out the lot of 10 state preceptors, Ji Chengzi was one of the first nascent soul cultivators to leave the Yaotai mountain. Thus, Ji Chengzi was one of the few nascent soul cultivators who escaped that disaster. Ji Chengzi left the Yaotai mountain and lost the opportunity to establish a country. If he wanted to cultivate, he had to find another way. Reverend Qing Su was naturally his first choice. After Reverend Qing Su left with a few gold core cultivators as a cover, Ji Chengzi and a few other nascent soul cultivators caught up with Reverend Qing Su and became the Grand Mist Ancestors' subordinates. Taoist Master Qing Su was originally unhappy that he failed to recruit Xiao Hua, but when he saw Ji Chengzi and other nascent soul cultivators coming over to pledge their allegiance, he was very happy. Soon after, he did not dare to stay in the vicinity of Yaotai Mountain and flew away with Ji Chengzi. After that, they waited at several other places for the Dao Gates cultivators that they had arranged to meet before returning together to pay their respects to the Grand Mist Ancestor. Even though the Grand Mist Ancestor was cold by nature, he had absolute leadership skills when it came to developing his forces. He treated Ji Chengzi and the others very well and was not stingy with their cultivation techniques, pills and secret techniques. In the past 200 years, Ji Chengzi, who had reached the end of his cultivation, broke through his bottleneck once again and reached the late nascent soul stage. He became Taoist Qing Su's right-hand man in one fell swoop. Previously, this Yaotai mountain was the place where Qing Su Taoist often came to recruit people. Later on, when Qing Su Taoist left for the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm, Ji Chengzi was in charge of this place. This time round, apart from being in charge of recruiting Dao sect cultivators, Ji Chengzi had also brought over 100 cultivators to snatch the lot of the imperial tutor. Looking at the fluttering Yao Juxu, Ji Chengzi's gaze drifted away. The scene from several hundred years ago involuntarily appeared in his mind. It's said that fate makes fools of people. It's really so. Thinking back, that Taoist Huada was so full of energy at the banquet that I was completely convinced. But who knew? He was actually a pawn of the Star Lord Palace. The Yaotai Mountain gathering that time was also a rare danger. Fortunately, I reacted quickly and withdrew in time. If I had followed Taoist Huada into Yaotai Mountain, I would definitely have fallen on the Yaotai Mountain like those nascent soul cultivators. Less than 1 out of 10 would survive. This is something that has never happened before in the Yaotai Mountain gathering. Moreover, there are many mysteries in the Yaotai Mountain gathering that have not been solved even until today. Who killed the Star Lord Palace's Kong Honggu? Even though some people suspect that it's my Grand Mist Ancestor, he has always smiled without saying anything and has never admitted it directly. Who knows if he disdains to admit it or denies it? After all, ambushing and killing a 5th-level Essence Energy Grandmaster is really nothing much to him. Some people also say that it's an internal strife in the Immortal Palace. There are other forces in the Star Lord Palace. Otherwise, how could there only be 10 State Masters in the Yaotai Mountain gathering? It's clear that someone from the Immortal Palace set a trap for Kong Honggu. Moreover, the Confucian cultivator hiding among the Taoist cultivators also killed several of Kong Hongwu's trusted subordinates one by one, bringing the entire Yaotai mountain under his control. Of course, some people also say that it's Xiao Hua, Taoist Xiao, whose name is now more famous than the ancestor. But others may not know, but I saw Xiao Hua at the banquet that year. He was really only a nascent soul cultivator at that time. It seems that he wasn't Taoist Huada's opponent. How could he possibly kill Kong Hongwu? Moreover, didn't the ancestor say at that time that Xiao Hua's strength was not enough to kill him? Xiao Hua's strength is not enough to kill Kong Hongwu. It must be the Immortal Palace's method. Perhaps the mastermind behind the scenes is the current Star Lord Palace's Palace Master Linghu Pihuan. Ji Chengzi had just thought of Linghu Pihuan when rumble. The sound of beating drums resounded from the Yaotai mountain. The sound of the drums was ear-splitting. The red clouds began to roll, and the snowflakes in the sky were shattered into pieces. Immediately, rays of golden light pierced straight down from the clouds, dyeing those snowflakes. Regardless of whether it was the snowflakes or the snowflakes, they all showed a kind of graceful luster. In this golden light, the red clouds in the sky began to gather in every direction. In no more than a moment, they again condensed into 28 enormous clouds. 28 brightly armored immortal generals appeared above the clouds. Ji Chengzi's gaze swept around. He already saw clearly that these immortal generals were the 28 star generals. They were different from the ones he had seen before. Let alone that Hornwood Dragon Linghu Pyron, Wellwood Dragon Shangguan Yeren, and Tail Fire Tiger Ouyang Jingran's appearances were different. Even the other dozen star generals had changed. Immediately, many ceremonial guards spread out. Dressed in Confucian attire, wearing a tall crown on his head, and holding a jade tablet in his hand, the figure of Star Lord Palace's Palace Master Linghu Pihuan flew out from the Yaotai mountain. Linghu Pihuan was the same as Kong Hongwu back then. His eyes wandered all around to look at the nearby Taoist cultivators. Afterwards, he raised the jade tablet with both hands and bowed towards the rising sun in the east, reciting, "My name is Linghu Pihuan. I have received the hidden immortal continent's Confucian cultivators' trust to control Star Lord Palace. Today is the day that Star Lord Palace opens the Yaotai Assembly. I, the 1,000 star generals, earnestly request the Confucian cultivators' past ancestors to permit me to open the Yaotai mountain to hold the Yaotai Assembly." And similarly, there was no difference at all. Following Linghu Pihuan's words, ray after ray of awe-inspiring qi descended from the Yaotai mountain. That awe-inspiring qi's color was extremely dazzling. Following this rainbow-like pillar of light, another imperial edict sparkling with golden light fell from the sky. However, just as Linghu Pihuan bowed, the instant he received the imperial edict, woo-woo, the sound of a gale's furious howl came from the distant horizon. The wind's howl in winter was originally normal, but before this howl, it unexpectedly shook all around. The heaven-earth origin energy within several tens of thousands of li seemed to be swallowed by a giant mouth as it flowed towards one place. Let alone that the crimson clouds and snowflakes in the sky were torn to shreds, even the rainbow-like pillar of light above the Yaotai mountain violently swayed in this gale. The previous world's might was practically swept clean. Linghu Pihuan was stunned, shame and anger appearing on his face. While he was inwardly astonished, he slowly straightened his body. The clear light in his eyes faintly flickered, wanting to look at the origin of the gale. It was also at this moment that the sound of thunder that soared to the sky rang out again. Countless thick, dragon-like thunderbolts descended from the sky, shrouding the distant horizon. Those streaks of lightning flickered, illuminating the entire sky. Wherever they passed, the auspicious aura of the Yaotai mountain and the rainbow-colored glow had long been covered. In front of this thunderbolt, the phenomenon that had just shocked the Taoist cultivators was like child's play. Fortune Gate. Linghu Pihuan didn't need to use the clear light at all. Seeing such a strange lightning, how could he not know what had happened? He looked at the place where the thunderbolt landed in astonishment. Seeing the flickering figures treading on clouds, he was truly puzzled in his heart. What are they doing at my Yaotai mountain? Of course, this thought was merely a flash, and Linghu Pihuan smiled bitterly again. Although the reputation of the Fortune Gate's disciples was currently unparalleled on the hidden immortal continent, The Fortune Gate's disciples were still Taoist disciples. What were they doing at the Yaotai Mountain? Other than participating in the Yaotai Mountain meeting, other than seizing the Grand Preceptor's lot, there didn't seem to be any other reason, right? However, the Fortune Gate had already braved the universal condemnation of the world's Confucian cultivators to establish a Taoist sect. Did they still care about establishing a Taoist sect? At the same time that Linghu Pihuan came to his senses, Shi Chengzi was also dumbfounded. Looking at the thunderbolt in the distance, he couldn't care less about hiding anything, and transmitted his voice to the other cultivators. Are they Fortune Gate's disciples? Could it be that they're also here to seize the Grand Preceptor's lot? Senior, a golden core cultivator who was closer to Shi Chengzi, replied bitterly, if there's no accident, they should be. But, Shi Chengzi said but a few times, but he couldn't continue. He was even more bitter than that golden core cultivator. While these Taoist cultivators and the Confucian cultivators of the Yaotai Mountain Star Lord Hall were still in shock, in the distant horizon, 100,000 Fortune Gate's disciples clad in armor and holding magic treasures in their hands flew over in an orderly formation. The battle formation formed by these 100,000 disciples was the Golden Crow Immortal Slaying Demonic Formation. Thick bolts of lightning fell on the battle formation, turning into lightning that scattered around the disciples, entangling the clouds beneath the Fortune Gate's disciples' feet. From afar, the 100,000 disciples looked like a huge golden crow made of lightning, exuding an invincible aura. Damn it! Linghu Pihuan couldn't help but curse inwardly. Are they here to seize the Grand Preceptor's lot? Or are they here to destroy my Star Lord Hall? Chapter 4591. Just as Linghu Piming was at a loss on how to respond, a will like that of heaven and earth emerged from the battle formation and crashed down on the Yaotai Mountain. Then, a tall and skinny figure that looked like a heavenly god flew out from the lightning, surrounded by lightning. Xiao Hua. When Linghu Piming saw this tall and thin figure, he actually felt a sense of relief. He held the Immortal Palace's imperial edict in his hand and watched Xiao Hua fly slowly, gathering all the light and darkness between heaven and earth on his body. He couldn't help but have mixed feelings in his heart. Linghu Piming knew more than Shi Chengzi, so he admired this enigmatic human race Mahayana realm even more. 300 years ago, he was the one who suggested Kong Hongwu recruit him, but 300 years later, he had become a supreme cultivator in the eyes of millions. Since Xiao Hua stood at the peak of human cultivation, then all the mysteries on the Yaotai Mountain that day had been solved. However, who would dare to mention the Yaotai Mountain gathering again? The thunder became louder and louder, and the lightning became more and more dazzling. The Fortune Gate disciples flew from the horizon to the side of the Yaotai Mountain. The several thousand Dao cultivators didn't dare to be negligent. They all tidied up their clothes and prepared to greet Xiao Hua. The monarchs who were preparing to recruit Dao cultivators under the Yaotai Mountain couldn't sit still in their tents and rushed out one by one. They didn't dare to approach and only stood respectfully on the ground, not daring to be slow in the slightest. As for the Star Lord Hall's immortal soldiers and immortal generals, where was their previous arrogance? They were quite embarrassed and nervously gripped their weapons. They looked at the Fortune Gate disciples and secretly glanced at Linghu Piming, afraid that Linghu Piming would give the order to attack. Just when Linghu Piming's mouth was dry, the lightning suddenly dimmed, and even the sound of thunder was annihilated. The 100,000 Fortune Gate disciples silently scattered in all directions, surrounding the Yaotai Mountain. Linghu Piming had only casually swept his clear sight light over the Fortune Gate's disciple closest to him, and he couldn't help but shudder in fear. Late nascent soul realm cultivator, his grandma, an ordinary Fortune Gate's disciple, is already at the upper 4th grade of essence force. These 100,000 Fortune Gate's disciples can easily flatten my Star Monarch Hall. While Linghu Piliu was still feeling apprehensive, the 100,000 Fortune Gate's disciples stopped in midair, not making a sound. Xiao Hua also quietly stood in the distance, no longer approaching Yaotai Mountain. For a time, apart from the falling snow and the falling clouds, there was no other sound between heaven and earth. Seeing that the Fortune Gate disciples were motionless, Linghu Piming was embarrassed once again. If it was before Linghu Pimu received the imperial edict from the Immortal Palace, he could have flown in front of Xiao Hua and bowed respectfully, facing Xiao Hua with the etiquette of a junior. But now that he had the imperial edict in his hand and was representing the immortal palace, he couldn't go and greet Xiao Hua personally. However, it was impossible for Fortune Gate's disciples to come over. After all, they represented Xiao Hua and the Fortune Gate. Just like this, the awkwardness lasted for half a cup of tea's time. The Star Lords Hall's Star Generals' backs were sweating. They were afraid that Xiao Hua would point her finger, and these 100,000 Fortune Gate disciples would attack. Sigh. Ling Hu Piming turned to look at these Star Generals, pondering for a moment, then sighed in his heart. He urged his body to move, but at this moment Fujiwen in front of Xiao Hua's body flickered. A strange rune appeared, and Fujiwen's figure crossed the sky and landed in front of Ling Hu Piming. I, Fujiwen, greets Hallmaster Ling Hu. Fujiwen did not lack etiquette, cupping his hands respectfully. Ling Hu Piming let out a long sigh of relief. He raised the imperial edict in his hand and smiled. This Hallmaster is now holding the Immortal Palace's imperial edict, temporarily considered as my Immortal Palace's envoy. Due to the Immortal Palace's etiquette, this Hallmaster is unable to perform a full greeting. Please forgive me, fellow Immortal Fu. It's fine. Fujiwen did not mind and said, my sect master has decreed that my Fortune Gate's disciples wish to establish a country in Gun Province. According to the Hidden Immortal Continent's customs, my Fortune Gate's disciples and other Dao Sect's disciples have come to the Yaotai Mountain to participate in the Yaotai Mountain's assembly. Hallmaster Ling Hu, please open the Yaotai Mountain's Dragon Gate according to the customs and place the Imperial Preceptor's lot in. Sigh. Xi Chengzi looked at Xiao Hua's familiar figure in the distance and sighed. If I had known earlier that Fortune Gate's disciples would come to take the Imperial Preceptor's lot, I wouldn't have come. In this world, which Dao Sect's cultivator can compete with Fortune Gate's disciples? I only hope that Fortune Gate's disciples will stop before going too far, and just take a few and leave the rest for I. I can also return and give an explanation to Ancestor Ah. Unfortunately, what happened next made Ji Qingzi feel like he had fallen into an ice cave. Ling Hu Piming probed, fellow Immortal Fu, may I ask how many Imperial Preceptors lots your sect needs? Fujiwen smiled and replied, no comment. After saying that, Fujiwen's figure returned to Xiao Hua's side. Since it's the Fortune Gate's Daoist Xiao who wants to establish a kingdom, this junior doesn't dare to compete. Before Fujiwen could land beside Xiao Hua, a golden core cultivator immediately bowed to Xiao Hua and left, not even leaving his name behind. Damn it. Xi Chengzi gritted his teeth. This cultivator is too opportunistic. Sure enough, after a short while, nearly 70% of the Dao Sect's cultivators bowed and left. There was no lack of mid-nascent soul cultivators among them. Xi Chengzi wanted to leave at this time, but he was afraid that the Grand Mist Ancestor would punish him, so he could only brace himself and stand in the air. Seeing that more and more Dao Sect's cultivators were leaving, Ling Hu Piming was also a little flustered. He did not dare to be negligent and hurriedly circulated his true qi to open the Imperial Edict. Rumble. The sound of a tide came from the Imperial Edict, just like before. Roar. A loud dragon's roar came from the tide, and soon after, a 10,000 zhang long yellow light rushed into the air. The yellow light was like a dragon leaping into the sky, dancing in the colorful light for a while before lying down on the Yaotai Mountain. An indescribable dragon's might and authority weighed down on the surroundings, even more than the Yaotai Mountain. Unfortunately, today was destined to be different from previous years. Just as this dragon's might and authority rushed out of the Yaotai Mountain and landed on the Fortune Gate's disciples, a light cough like a thunder formation sounded, and the space within 100 li of the Yaotai Mountain immediately shattered. Tens of millions of lightning threads poured out from this space, and all of the dragon's might and authority were completely shattered by the yellow light like a dragon leaping into the air, scattering into pieces in the air. At this time, the voice that sounded like a big yellow bell reverberated between heaven and earth. By the will of the heavens, the hidden immortal ancestors congratulate each other. In today's enlightening Jade Pavilion Grand Meeting, the stars will. This voice was incomparably loud and dignified, but in the ears of Ling Hu Piming and the others, they couldn't help but bitterly smile and feel awkward in their hearts. Even in the ears of Xi Chengzi and the others, this voice was far less shocking than before, not to mention the effect of melting the foundation of their Tao. With great difficulty, the voice settled. Boom! A loud sound like a wave crashing into a mountain rock rang out, and the entire imperial decree slowly closed. The imperial decree once again fell into Ling Piming's hands. If it was before, Ling Piming just had to send the imperial decree into the sky, and the yellow dragon would transform into a dragon gate. Unfortunately, the yellow dragon had already been shattered by Xiaohua's cough, so how could there still be the auspicious sign of the yellow dragon transforming into a dragon gate? Ling Piming was also helpless, and he still sent the imperial decree out. The imperial decree was like a meteor that soared into the sky and crashed into the sky. A huge black hole flickered and a golden frame appeared. Xiaohua's figure moved and then he stopped. A wisp of Buddhist consciousness appeared and disappeared along with the imperial decree into the black hole. At the same time, a splendor that was even more dazzling than the sun rushed out from the black hole. As everyone slightly closed their eyes, a somewhat damaged dragon gate appeared on the Jade Mountain. Ling Piming hastily flew to the front of the dragon gate, raised his hand, and took out several jade boxes from his wide sleeve. He stole a glance at Xiaohua, and said in a slightly loud voice, "Fellow immortals, these are several treasures that my Star Lord Hall has prepared for this Jade Pavilion Grand Meeting. If any fellow immortals are fated, feel free to look for them in the Jade Pavilion Grand Meeting." After he finished speaking, Ling Piming did not explain what was inside these jade boxes. He raised his hand and sent them into the dragon gate. Several colored carps swallowed them, and just like before, they disappeared without a trace. Finally, Ling Piming waved his sleeve again, and several hundred rays of multicolored light rushed out. Several hundred fist-sized, somewhat similar to the imperial scholar's lot, flew out. Ling Piming coughed and said, "These are the 483 Imperial Scholars' lot for this year's Jade Pavilion Grand Meeting. My Star Lord Hall will place them within the Winnowing Basket Water Leopard, 3 Water Ape, and Chariot Waterworm's 10-star arrays." Hastily saying this, Ling Piming waved his hand. Several hundred dragon roars came from the Swanee Imperial Jade Seal. The Swanee outside the Imperial Jade Seal seemed to come alive, roaring as it brought a yellow cloud into the dragon gate and disappeared. Ling Piming was finally relieved. He bowed towards Gao Tian and saluted. "Thank heavens for your kindness, the ceremony is complete." Immediately after, the 28 star generals looked at each other. Some star generals' faces were filled with joy, some with bitterness, and even more with schadenfreude. One by one, they urged their magic clouds to descend into the Jade Mountain. Everyone. Fujiwen saw all the star generals leave, loudly shouting, "Enter the array, take all of the 483 national preceptors' lots." Yes, the Fortune Gate's disciples' auras were like rainbows, and as they answered in unison, the damaged Dragon Gate swayed twice. Seeing the 100,000 Fortune Gate's disciples enter the Dragon Gate one by one like lightning, Ji Chengzi and the other Dao Sex cultivators no longer dared to hesitate. They all turned their heads towards Xiaohua and cupped their fists, urging their figures to leave. Although the 483 Imperial Scholars' lot was not a small number, enough to establish 483 Dao Sex countries on the hidden immortal continent, Ji Chengzi and the others did not doubt that with the Fortune Gate strength, establishing 483 countries would be a piece of cake. After Ji Chengzi and the others left, Ling Piming tidied his clothes and flew in front of Xiaohua. He bowed and said, "Junior Ling Piming has come to greet Daoist Xiao." Junior was previously holding the Immortal Palace's imperial decree, so it was inconvenient for Junior to salute. Now Junior has specially come to ask for forgiveness. Cast a monthly vote, cast a recommendation vote, bookmark, gift, and thank all forms of support. Chapter 4592. Amen. Xiaohua nodded slightly, glancing at Ling Piming and saying, "I know. You don't need to mind." Ling Piming said with a flattering smile, "Then Junior can rest assured. Apart from asking for forgiveness, Junior also wants to ask Senior. If Senior wants to establish a country, Senior only needs one imperial preceptor's signature. Furthermore, if Senior were to establish over 400 Daoist kingdoms at once, it would bring about endless trouble." Xiaohua looked at Ling Piming and said with a smile, "Hall Master Ling Hu, Do you want to know the reason? Yes, Senior. If Senior can give pointers, Junior will be endlessly grateful. Ling Hu Piming said with a nod. I can tell you. However, you have to tell me something first. Xiao Hua's gaze landed on Ling Hu Piming. That lightning-like gaze caused Ling Hu Piming to be alarmed, seemingly thinking of something. He hesitated slightly and said in a low voice, if it doesn't involve the Immortal Palace's secrets, Junior will definitely report truthfully. Sure enough, Xiao Hua asked, you tell me why there were only 10 Imperial Preceptors' signatures in that Jadestige summit that I participated in back then. Why did the entire Jadestige mountain set up 3 grand formations all at once? What exactly was your goal in hunting my Dao sect's nascent soul cultivators? Ling Hu Piming had a headache and said with a flattering smile, Senior, this Junior is aware of the problem that you spoke of, but I also know very little. Furthermore, this Junior also really doesn't dare to reveal anything to Senior. Senior, please understand. If Ling Hu Piming kept evading, Xiao Hua might use some divine ability to search Ling Hu Piming's memories. But Ling Hu Piming was so calm, Xiao Hua couldn't make things difficult for him either. However, after Xiao Hua pondered slightly, he asked again via voice transmission, Ling Hu Piming, since that's the case, then I won't force you either. I'll ask you another matter that doesn't involve the Immortal Palace's secrets. Ling Hu Piming frowned, even more puzzled. Since it wasn't the Immortal Palace's secrets, why didn't Xiao Hua ask but instead voice transmission? However, he didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly replied via voice transmission, Senior, please speak. As long as Junior knows, I'll definitely say everything I know. Star-Lord Hall's previous Hall Master Kong Honggu, whose trusted aide is he? Xiao Hua's eyes were fixed on Ling Hu Piyu, carefully observing the changes in his expression. When Ling Hu Piming heard this question, he immediately let out a sigh of relief. With a smile, he transmitted his voice. Senior, on the surface, Palace Master Kong Honggu is a trusted aide of Lord Sun Peng of the Hall of Enlightenment. However, according to what I know, this Hall Master Kong is also a member of the Heaven and Earth faction. Heaven and Earth Gate. Xiao Hua was startled. He seemed to have heard of this Heaven and Earth sect before, but he had never met anyone from the Heaven and Earth sect, so he was somewhat puzzled. What kind of organization is the Heaven and Earth sect? Senior. At this point, Ling Hu Piming had already revealed everything he knew. He hurriedly replied, the so-called Heaven and Earth sect is the Immortal Palace's Heavenly Mystery Hall's organization in the 3 continents. Inside are Heavenly Mystery Hall's secret agents. Oh, how did you know? Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and asked curiously, this matter? Who else knows? Junior is someone Palace Master Kong trusts. There are some things he does not hide from Junior. However, every year, Palace Master Kong leaves Star Sovereign Hall for a few days, and at this time if something happens it is Junior who deals with it. Therefore, only Junior knows about this matter. Since they were talking about a person who had died several hundred years ago, Ling Hu Piming did not have any psychological burden, casually telling the truth, and coincidentally, Junior also knows that these few days are the days when the Heavenly Mystery Hall's Palace Master is personally inspecting the hidden immortal mainland. How do you know? Xiao Hua asked. This. Ling Hu Piming hesitated even more. He hesitated for a moment, looking at the back of the last Fortune Gate disciple who entered the Jade Mountain range. He clenched his teeth and asked, can Senior answer Junior's question? Naturally. Xiao Hua nodded and answered. Is Senior familiar with my Confucian immortal master? Ling Hu Piming's question was out of Xiao Hua's expectations, but Xiao Hua did not hesitate and nodded. Yes, this old man and once you are old acquaintances. Hearing that his guess was the same as Xiao Hua's answer, Ling Hu Piming did not hesitate and said, then Junior must know the true scholar. And you don't need to say anymore, this old man already knows. Xiao Hua instantly understood that this Ling Hu Piming was a trusted aide of a true scholar. He naturally knew some secrets of the Heavenly Mystery Hall. Many thanks, Senior. Seeing that Xiao Hua did not ask any more questions, Ling Hu Piming expressed his gratitude. In fact, when Xiao Hua and Gusu Chodi left Jade Mountain Range, Ling Hu Piming had the opportunity to report to the Immortal Palace, but he reported to the True Scholar first, and the True Scholar's reply was concealed. But, just by leaving for a few days, I'm afraid it's not easy to determine Kong Hongwu's background, right? Xiaohua asked again. Ling Hupiming didn't really understand why the dead Kong Hongwu was worth Xiaohua's repeated confirmation. However, he still honestly replied, Senior, please know that this junior. After Kong Hongwu died, this junior temporarily took charge of Star-Lord Hall. This junior knew that there were some secrets in Star-Lord Hall that belonged to Kong Hongwu. Thus, the place where Kong Hongwu usually lived, before this junior received the order from the Immortal Palace. This junior didn't dare to rashly enter. However, after this junior entered, I discovered that the places that this junior had previously marked had all changed. These are the Heavenly Mystery Hall's actions. Good. Xiaohua nodded. This old man understands. Then, can Senior tell this junior why the Fortune Gates disciples snatched all the Imperial Preceptor's lots? Ling Hupiming asked. This matter concerns this junior's future. This junior cannot not ask. It's very simple. Xiaohua smiled first. This old man wants to establish a country in Xiao Country. Xiao Country? Ling Hupiming was shocked then. Then Senior Xiao Country. Isn't it the biggest Dao Gate on the hidden immortal mainland? No, the biggest empire that surpasses all the Confucian cultivation countries? Ling Hupiming, you must remember. The Fortune Gate Xiao Country is a paradise in the hearts of the common people. Although it is the biggest country on the hidden immortal mainland, it is not called an empire. Since the previous scholars from various families were willing to preserve this paradise, then this old man will also preserve this paradise. Remember, it is to be preserved as a paradise. If anyone wants to touch the Xiao Country, don't blame us, the Fortune Gate's disciples, for being ruthless. Xiaohua said with a smile, but there was a hint of coldness in his voice. Yes, this junior understands. This junior will immediately send a message to the Immortal Palace. Ling Hupiming's expression changed slightly, bowing as he said, many thanks for Senior's reminder. Don't be anxious, don't be anxious. Xiaohua stretched out a finger and shook it. This old man has news that will make the Immortal Palace even more excited. Senior, please speak. Ling Hupiming's face turned even paler. This old man wants to ask you, as the Star Sovereign Palace's Hall Master, do you know the way to the Immortal Palace? Xiaohua stared at Ling Hupiming and asked again. Cold sweat appeared on Ling Hupiming's back as he carefully said, Senior may not know, but when this junior needs to return to the Immortal Palace will send an order, and this junior will be able to find the way back with the order. However, if this junior does not need to return to the Immortal Palace, this junior will definitely not be able to find the Immortal Palace. Of course, if Senior snatches this junior's order, Senior should be able to find the Immortal Palace, and this junior will have to bear the heavy punishment. Don't be afraid. Xiaohua replied, how can this old man snatch your order? This old man's purpose of taking the Imperial Preceptor's lot is to find the Immortal Palace. Senior, Ling Hupiming hurriedly called out. Why are you going to the Immortal Palace? You are a Dao Gates Grand Ascension Stage expert. A Dao Gates Grand Ascension Stage expert cannot go to the Immortal Palace. Xiaohua sneered. What kind of rule is this? But, Ling Hupiming was somewhat speechless. No one could forbid a Dao Gates Grand Ascension Stage expert from going to the Immortal Palace, not even Immortal Emperor Go Chan. But the problem was that the Immortal Palace's Confucian cultivators and Dao Gates cultivators were enemies. Xiaohua, a Dao Gates Grand Ascension Stage expert, was swaggering around the Confucian cultivators' Immortal Palace, not provoking them? At this moment, Ling Hupiming suddenly realized something and exclaimed, I understand, Senior, you want to use the Imperial Preceptor's lot to go to the Immortal Palace? Correct. Xiaohua glanced sideways at the Jade Mountain's Dragon Gate. At this moment, that Dragon Gate's Dragon Gate was shaking, and Fortune Gate's disciples had already begun to rush out. 100,000 Fortune Gate's disciples were pressing down on the Jade Mountain. Not to mention a dozen star arrays. Even if the entire Jade Mountain was opened and the 3 star arrays were placed on the Jade Mountain, the Star-Lord Hall star generals wouldn't dare to go overboard and stop these fierce generals. After the first Fortune Gate's disciple flew out, even more Fortune Gate's disciples rushed out. These Fortune Gate's disciples all flew in front of Fujiwen, and after handing over the Imperial Preceptor's lot, they stood in midair. Can Junior take his leave now? Seeing that more than 400 disciples had already flown out, Ling Hupiming's face flushed red. This was the shortest Jade Pavilion assembly in history, and if there were no accidents, there wouldn't be such a short record in the future. Go. Xiaohua nodded. You can report this matter to the Immortal Palace. Many thanks, Senior. Ling Hupiming bowed and hurriedly flew into the Jade Mountain. In the time it took to exchange a few words, Fuji Wen looked at the Imperial Preceptor's lot that he had put into his cosmos sack and flew over. The Fortune Gate's disciples that flew out from the Jade Mountain no longer looked at Fuji Wen, and all flew in midair in formation. Master! Fuji Wen passed the cosmos sack to Xiaohua and said, There are 483 Imperial Preceptor's lots, not one less. Good. Xiaohua received the cosmos sack, and his divine sense swept over it. He took out a lot and said, Let this disciple bring this back to the soaring Dragon Mountain range and give it to His Highness Lan. Let him establish the Xiao country. Yes, Master. Fuji Wen took the Imperial Preceptor's lot and flew into the distance. After giving a few instructions, the disciple took the Imperial Preceptor's lot and flew away. Chapter 4593. Swoosh. In the distant sky, an obscure energy fluctuation flashed and rushed towards the horizon, disappearing in an instant. If he guessed correctly, it should be Ling Hupiming sending a message to the Immortal Palace. Humph. Xiaohua snorted coldly, inwardly thinking, 1 day in the heavens, 1 year on Earth. The Immortal Palace is obviously inside a space-time vortex. Even if Ling Hupiming's message reaches the Immortal Palace, as long as it breaks through the time barrier, time will immediately slow down. Before this message reaches the High Cloud Hall, this Xiao will have arrived. This kind of message, what use is it? After waiting for half an incense stick's time, the Fortune Gate's disciples finally came out from the Dragon Gate. When the last disciple passed through the Dragon Gate, Ling Hupiming's figure flickered a few times inside the Dragon Gate as if he was bowing to Xiaohua. Then with a loud bang, the Dragon Gate closed from top to bottom, and the thousands of colorful carps turned into dragons and disappeared into the void. All the golden lights disappeared at the same time, and the snowflakes that resembled the jade juju flower once again fluttered down, covering everything under the cover of time. Xiaohua stared at Yao Jushue for a moment, then waved his hand and took out the Kunlun mirror. A beam of light swept over all the Fortune Gate's disciples and sucked them into the Shenhua continent. Soon after, Xiaohua took out an Imperial Preceptor's lot from his Qiankuan pouch. As he activated his magic power, a crackling sound rang out. The restrictions on the surface of the Imperial Preceptor's lot were all broken. As Xiaohua raised his hand and pointed at the Baiyan, an angry howl was heard. The Baiyan turned into an ordinary jade seal, and the Baiyan's shadow condensed from inscriptions soared into the sky and flew to a place like lightning. Even someone as strong as Xiaohua did not dare to be careless. He released his divine sense and hurriedly chased after the phantom. After Xiaohua was far away, Ling Hupiming walked out from the Yaotai Mountain. He smiled wryly as he looked at the various countries' monarchs who were preparing to leave. Looking at the excitement on their faces, he sighed, Granny, I'm afraid this old man will become a laughingstock in the future. However, after Ling Hupiming finished sighing, he looked at the direction Xiaohua disappeared in, and muttered to himself thoughtfully, but if there are too many laughingstocks, and even the Immortal Palace becomes a laughingstock, then will a laughingstock still be a laughingstock? Xiaohua naturally wouldn't care about who became the laughingstock. As he urged the lightning evasion technique to chase after the State Preceptor's lot, he inwardly pondered, today, I gained a lot on Yaotai Mountain. I'm afraid that Ling Huping would never have thought that he would personally tell this Xiao a great secret. I obtained the Jojo Cauldron from Kong Hongwu's Qinkuan bag, and it was because of the Jojo Cauldron that I was sent to the heavenly prison. Therefore, the master behind Kong Hongwu should be the same as Sun Chong and Sun Hao's master. They should be from Tianji Palace, not the so-called patrol envoy. Sun Jian had returned to the Immortal Palace for so long, but there was still no news of him finding Sun Hao. Sun Hao had probably found out and had hidden himself long ago. Although this Xiao didn't have time to ask by and about Tianji Palace, as long as this Xiao arrives at the Immortal Palace and transmits this matter to Sun Jian, wouldn't the truth be revealed? While Xiaohua was pondering, the State Preceptor's lot had already disappeared. Xiaohua had no choice but to once again activate another state preceptor's lot. The state preceptor's lot once again gave birth to a shadow. This shadow flew in a different direction from the previous one, so Xiaohua had to change direction again to chase after it. In this way, after nearly 100 state preceptor's lots were used up, Xiaohua arrived at a somewhat strange place. However, he saw that near this space, his divine sense couldn't pass through, as if it was blocked by mud. Moreover, not only was there no heaven and earth origin chi near this space, even the righteous chi couldn't be seen. When Xiaohua flew, his figure was stretched extremely long, and the sound of the lightning evasion also began to become hoarse. Xiaohua had previously passed through the time turbulence, so he knew that he should have arrived near another time turbulence. Although he hadn't entered the time turbulence yet, the fragments of the time rules had already begun to interfere in the nearby time turbulence. Xiaohua stood in the space, but he wasn't in a hurry to take out the state preceptor's lot. He raised his hand and patted his forehead, and the delusion breaker Dharma eye between his eyebrows opened. Sure enough, in the delusion breaker Dharma eye, Xiaohua's surroundings were filled with thread-like fluctuations. These fluctuations were dark in color, and as they overflowed, there was a kind of extremely faint cloud in the air. The cloud and mist not only blocked divine sense, but also could cover the delusion breaker Dharma eye. Xiaohua flew for a while, dodging these clouds and mist, and he could see clearly again. In the distant darkness, there were hundreds of dark green little dots flickering in the darkness. These little dots were like sesame seeds, and couldn't even compare to the brilliance of ordinary fireflies. I'm afraid this is a maze. Xiaohua's hand pinched his chin as he thought to himself. Soon after, he activated another state preceptor's lot. Whoosh! The shadow flew out, turning into a yellow inscription and rushing into one of the little dots. Xiaohua hurriedly used the lightning escape technique to chase after it. When he got closer, Xiaohua discovered that the dark green had actually turned into a whirlpool that was thousands of feet wide. This whirlpool was spinning rapidly, and it looked very slender inside. A dark fluorescent light was emitted from the whirlpool. Xiaohua's figure fell into the vortex. That vortex didn't produce any suction force, and when Xiaohua's figure moved, his entire figure was stretched and squashed, turning into a strange light and shadow that fell into the vortex. In Xiaohua's eyes, the entire vortex was pitch black, and even that dark green color couldn't be seen. Only a series of memories like light and shadow appeared in Xiaohua's mind, and then quickly disappeared. After flying for the time it took to eat a meal, Xiaohua felt that he had been stretched into a line. His head was the head of the line, and his voice was the tail of the line. His entire body pierced through this vortex. A moment later, Xiaohua saw a five-colored light appear, and it seemed that the entire vortex had reached its end. At the same time, the leg that was far away in the vortex appeared below Xiaohua's body faster than teleportation. As for the state preceptor's lot, it had already flown to who knows where. Xiaohua continued to move towards the five-colored clouds. When he got closer, Xiaohua was once again shocked, because in front of him, in the seemingly endless space, a huge vortex formed by five-colored clouds had enveloped the entire space. The colors of the vortex formed by the five-colored clouds were clear. One layer wrapped around the other, and one layer wrapped around the other. In the end, no one could tell which color was mixed with which. Other than the five colors that filled the eyes, there was only five colors. And above this vortex, there was a huge five-colored torch that filled the entire space. It was impossible to see the size of this five-colored torch with the naked eye. The five-colored vortex was spinning, and the five-colored torch was also spinning. Although it looked like it was spinning slowly, in Xiaohua's delirium eyes, there was a feeling of heaven and earth spinning in Xiaohua's mind. Xiaohua didn't dare to look any longer and hurriedly looked around the torch. He saw that every time the torch rotated, there would be some multicolored light and fluctuations flying out of the torch. These multicolored light and fluctuations flew into the surrounding space and set off ripples of multicolored light. Within these ripples, the laws of time were actually pervasive. Inside this five-colored vortex should be the immortal palace. Xiaohua thought to himself, and slightly narrowed his delirium eyes that were already swollen with pain. Xiaohua didn't dare to rush in recklessly, and still took out another imperial preceptor's lot. Whoosh! As Xiaohua expected, Just as the Imperial Preceptor's lot phantom flew out, a halo immediately flew out of the five-colored vortex. This halo landed on the Imperial Preceptor's lot phantom and transformed into an even smaller vortex. At the mouth of this vortex, the Imperial Preceptor's lot phantom fell into this vortex and didn't appear again. Xiaohua closed his delirium eyes. The space around Xiaohua was similar to the void, and there was nothing special about it. Xiaohua urged his body to fly towards the Imperial Preceptor's lot phantom, but after flying for 1,000 feet, Xiaohua felt the space begin to slowly vibrate, and then the space separated into layers. The layers began to move up and down, and his body also moved along with the space, leaving behind a seemingly solid phantom in each layer of space. Moreover, these phantom layers began to extend and stretch. When there were more than 1,000 of these phantoms, there was a loud bang, and a layer of space in front of Xiaohua's head gave birth to a five-colored cloud, blocking Xiaohua's path. Layers of cobweb-like inscription chains overflowed in the cloud, and a loud sound came from the crisscrossing inscription chains. A majestic and shocking aura was also born from the inscription chains. Xiaohua understood that it was time to verify his identity here. He didn't have a token of the Immortal Palace, so if he wanted to pass, he could only force his way through. Therefore, Xiaohua didn't hesitate. His right hand clenched into a fist, and wisps of lightning condensed on the surface of his fist, converging into a net, and thumb-sized talismans flashed with a mysterious golden light in the lightning. As Xiaohua's right fist swung out, the space for several miles around him began to wrinkle, and layers of world's origin qi seeped out from the wrinkles, turning into fist-sized crystals that fell into the lightning. Roar! The lightning turned into a dragon, and with the power of space, it rushed into the blockade of the inscription chains with unparalleled force. The lightning was like a supreme will, and the chains were like strict order. When the will met the order, a loud bang sounded. Wherever the lightning passed, the chains were broken, and the thousands of scattered inscriptions were destroyed as soon as they touched the powerful lightning, turning into pure awe-inspiring qi. In the awe-inspiring qi, the lightning became more vigorous and constantly grew stronger. Although more and more inscription chains waved like tentacles, trying to seal the lightning, all the chains were defeated in just a moment. Seeing a hole of 1,000 feet in size appearing in the blockade of the inscription chains, Xiaohua urged his figure to calmly pass through it. Xiaohua's figure had just passed through the blockade, and in front of him was an immortal palace hidden by five-colored clouds. A towering heavenly gate of 1,000 feet in size stood in front of Xiaohua. Unfortunately, before Xiaohua could see the heavenly gate clearly, he heard a roar. "Bold thief, you actually dare to trespass the heavenly gate of southern heaven. How dare you?" Chapter 45-94. Following this furious roar, an immortal general even larger than Qua Chong of the Sun Palace appeared in front of Xiaohua with two hammers the size of hills in his hands. Behind him, thousands of immortal soldiers flew over with weapons in their hands, wanting to surround Xiaohua. "This old man is Dao Gate's Xiaohua." Xiaohua looked at the immortal general flying over and stopped. He said indifferently, "Today, I came to the Immortal Palace to request an audience with Immortal Emperor Gaochen. This old man has something to ask him. Please return and report it to him." "Humph." The immortal general snorted and shouted, "Damned evil path. Trespassing into the Immortal Palace is a capital offense. Hand over your life." As he spoke, the celestial general's body suddenly expanded. His mountain-like hammer streaked across the sky with a whoosh, and smashed down like a meteor. A huge gust of wind enveloped the space around Xiaohua. Xiaohua frowned slightly. With a wave of his Taoist robe, an unparalleled force came out of his Taoist robe and collided with the hammer's force. The seemingly incomparably powerful hammer had a powerful momentum. With a wave of his Taoist robe, the space shattered and the force was annihilated. Even the hammer flew out like a piece of paper. The immortal general's body tumbled a few times in the air before he managed to stabilize himself. His face, which had been filled with arrogance earlier, was now filled with astonishment and surprise. As for the thousands of immortal soldiers, they were even more at a loss. They held their weapons and didn't know whether to surround or defend. Your Grand Mist ancestor?" The immortal general shouted in shock. You actually dare to cause trouble in the immortal palace, you. This old man is Dao Gates Xiaohua. Xiaohua looked at the immortal general who didn't even know his name and said indifferently, quickly report to Lingyun Palace. Xiaohua. The immortal general was stunned at first. Then his entire body trembled. He shouted in shock, Your fortune gates, Xiaohua? You also came to cause trouble in the immortal palace? This old man didn't come to cause trouble in the immortal palace. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This old man has something to ask immortal Emperor Gaochen. Quickly go and report this. Phew. The immortal general heaved a long sigh of relief. He stood up, tidied up his armor, and mustered his courage. He cupped his fists and said, I am the Southern Heavenly Gates Guardian General, Kuai Yu. Greetings, Taoist Xiao. Xiaohua raised his hand. Spiritual Master, please wait here for a moment. I will inform Heavenly King Fuyu and ask him to make a decision. Kuai Yu saw Xiaohua's amiable face and asked tentatively. Of course Xiaohua didn't mind. He nodded and said, Then I'll have to trouble you. Kuai Yu was overjoyed. After bowing to Xiaohua, he gave a few orders to the immortal soldiers and rushed into the Southern Heaven Gate. After the immortal soldiers flew back to the Southern Heaven Gate, Xiaohua placed his hands behind his back and looked up at the lofty Southern Heaven Gate, while sighing with emotion in his heart. He had never been to the Southern Heaven Gate before, but he felt a sense of familiarity when he looked at it. This was because he had seen the Southern Heaven Gate when he first came to the hidden immortal continent. However, that Southern Heaven Gate was in an illusion. He remembered that day at the Longevity Town, when Mo Jianli, Zhu Junfeng, and the others worked together to create an illusion of an immortal palace from a small vermilion gourd, which made Xiaohua truly admire it. Now, even though Xiaohua didn't see any heaven-suppressing martial or any golden-armored deities, the Southern Heavenly Gate that was made of jade was exactly the same as the Southern Heavenly Gate in the illusion. Back then, I only thought about how to recover my cultivation and how to step into the nascent soul stage. I never thought about seeing the real Southern Heaven Gate. However, in just a few tens of thousands of years, I have already reached the peak of cultivation and was only one step away from ascending. Now, I am standing in front of the Southern Heaven Gate to have a face-to-face conversation with the Confucian Supremacy, Immortal Emperor Go-chan. Thinking about it carefully, there is nothing more in the world than this. No matter how high one's goal is, no matter how big one's dream is, as long as one has the right direction, one can walk step by step, stand up when one falls, correct one's mistakes. As long as one has enough endurance, one will eventually reach the end of the road and see the realization of one's dream. What a pity! Although the Southern Heavenly Gate shines with golden light and red light and emits purple mist, no matter how you look at it, it still looks a little cold. The Immortal Palace is Xion's immortal palace, and also Xion's home, but there is no Xion at the door. Even if it is endlessly auspicious, how can it compare to the Guozhuang house in my heart? Although the Guozhuang house is small, it has parents. Although they are poor, they have children in their hearts. It is 10,000 times better than this immortal palace with its strict immortal rules. Xion will definitely like it. The immortal soldiers looked at Xiaohua, who was as steady as Mount Tai, and their palms were sweating. They stared at Xiaohua, afraid that he would explode and hurt someone. However, how could they have known that Xiaohua's heart had already flown to the Guozhuang house? Woo! Just as the immortal soldiers were in a state of shock, waves of vast energy rushed out from all directions of the immortal palace. Multicolored clouds also flew over from all directions of the immortal palace. At the same time, waves of baleful energy surged along with the clouds and energy pillars, quickly gathering inside the Southern Heaven Gate. Thousands of cryptic fluctuations also emerged from the Southern Heaven Gate and spread to the surrounding space. As these ripples spread out, strands of strange light appeared like swimming fishes, filling the space between Xiaohua and the Southern Heavenly Gate. Humph! Xiaohua snorted coldly and withdrew his homesickness. His gaze fell on the light. He saw that the extremely nervous immortal soldiers at the Southern Heaven Gate had already relaxed. They looked at Xiaohua with ridicule, as if they were looking at a fish that had walked into a trap. Boom boom! The Southern Gate of Heaven shook like a cannon. Intense light flashed at the Southern Gate of Heaven, and several huge inscription chains intertwined and rushed out. The inscription chains were like pythons. When the inscription chains flew out of the southern gate of heaven, they lined up in front of Xiaohua. Dozens of immortal generals wearing armor, holding halberds, whips, sabers, and swords revealed themselves. Hey! The immortal general at the front raised his halberd and pointed at Xiaohua with the tip of the halberd. Ignorant demon, do you know where this is? Xiaohua looked at this immortal general from top to bottom. His expression did not change. He was simply too lazy to answer. Who would have thought that this immortal general would not give up? He still arrogantly shouted, "This is the immortal palace. Don't you know? It's one thing for you to be a frog in a well in the hidden immortal continent. We immortal generals did not receive the immortal emperor's order to conquer, so we turned a blind eye and pretended not to know. Today you actually dared to provoke my southern heaven gate. If I don't teach you a lesson, do you really think you are crazy?" Xiaohua coldly swept his gaze over that immortal general. He slightly raised his hand and flicked his middle finger. A bolt of lightning appeared from Xiaohua's hand and shot out like an arrow. Before the immortal general could finish speaking, that bolt of lightning had already landed in front of him. The immortal general was shocked. He did not care about his sharp tongue and hurriedly waved his halberd. A righteous aura mixed with a sharp aura chopped towards the bolt of lightning. That immortal general's skill was also exceptional. He used the halberd's tip to hit the bolt of lightning. However, the seemingly invisible bolt of lightning hit the halberd. Boom! A loud sound rang out. That immortal general was as if he was struck by lightning. His entire body trembled and his halberd was sent flying. Ah! The immortal general turned pale with fright and hurriedly flew back. The immortal generals beside him also moved and blocked in front of him, guarding against Xiaohua's pursuit. Ignorant brat! Xiaohua coldly snorted and said, "Don't make this old man angry again, otherwise." Xiaohua did not finish speaking. He still stood proudly in front of the immortal generals with his hands behind his back. You! That immortal general stabilized himself and shouted, "Who are you?" Xiaohua unhappily glanced at this immortal general. He was too lazy to pay attention to this immortal general. He had a good temper. If he encountered the Grand Mist Ancestor, he would have taken this immortal general's life in one blow. Quick! Form the Golden Jade Skylock Great Formation. Seeing that Xiaohua did not answer, that immortal general waved his hand and said, "Yes, General." Hearing the order, the immortal general on the left responded. He moved his body and began to form the formation. In just a moment, a great formation was arranged in the air. This great formation flashed with golden light. Lines of inscriptions that were dozens of feet thick intertwined and shuttled through each immortal general's body. Every immortal general's body in the formation emitted a clear light. This clear light was lustrous and pure like the blue sky. Every thick inscription that fell into the blue sky would reveal a lock. This lock had a mysterious inscription and a shocking aura surged out from it. What was special was that after every inscription rushed out from the edge of the Great Formation, it fell into the southern heavenly gate behind the Great Formation. The entire southern heavenly gate also transformed into a huge inscription that firmly protected the immortal palace. Bang! Seeing that the Great Formation was completed, that immortal general's confidence increased greatly. He pointed at Xiaohua and said, "Who are you? You dare to trespass into the immortal palace? Don't you know that this is a violation of the immortal law?" Xiaohua glanced at that immortal general. He did not want to answer, but when he thought about it, he came to find immortal Emperor Go Chun to inquire about new information. He did not really want to attack the immortal palace. Even if he wanted to fall out with them, wouldn't that have to wait until the end? There was no need for him to rashly fall out with the immortal palace when the situation was unclear. Thus, Xiaohua replied indifferently, "This old man is Xiaohua of the Fortune Gate. Today, I came to the immortal palace to ask for an audience with immortal Emperor Go Chun. All of you quickly go and report this. Fortune Gate." Hearing Xiaohua speak, that immortal general was stunned. He looked around and asked with some surprise, "Did this general hear wrongly? When did the hidden immortal continent have a Tao cultivator sect?" I know. At the edge of the Great Formation, a few immortal generals came to their senses and shouted, "A few days ago, The mysterious Yellow Order updated the mysterious Yellow Order, and all the people on it are disciples of the Fortune Gate. Many of my Heavenly King Palace's generals lost to the Lunar Temple. Presumably, this Tao cultivator should be someone on the mysterious Yellow Order, right? Give it as a reward and thank you for all your support. Chapter 4595. No wonder he's so arrogant. That immortal general still hadn't reported his name. Hearing his subordinate's explanation, he sneered. Seems like he has some tricks up his sleeve. However, the so-called profound yellow list is a hunting list for us Confucian cultivators. Being on it doesn't necessarily bring you any glory. Xiaohua didn't reply. He merely looked on as the immortal generals stomped their feet like clowns. He knew that the Tao sect had been in decline for a long time, and these immortal generals had always been arrogant. Even though he was a grand ascension stage cultivator of the Tao sect, this news might not have reached their ears. Even if this news reached their ears, they would only treat it as a rumor. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. Not to mention, the Immortal Palace was different from the hidden Immortal Continent. The Fortune Gate's disciples purged the profound yellow list 50 years ago, and the Lunar Temple was defeated in the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range 50 years ago. In the eyes of these immortal generals, it was only a few dozen days ago. How could they know about his reputation on the hidden Immortal Continent? The immortal general was stunned by Xiaohua's methods, but when he heard that Xiaohua was a Fortune Gate disciple, he had a plan in his heart. He smiled and said, "The Lunar Temple's Sun Gu is an idiot. He snatched the immortal emperor's decree from my Heavenly King Palace and wanted to take advantage of it. Who would have thought that he would be defeated in a small Soaring Dragon Mountain range? Now, I'll let Sun Gu see who is the #1 general below the Heavenly King." With that, the immortal general raised his hand and shouted, "Generals, listen to my command." Humph. Xiaohua couldn't take it anymore and snorted coldly. His voice was like a sharp needle that pierced into the immortal generals' minds. There's a saying in the mortal world that it's easy to meet the king of hell, but difficult to hide from the little ghosts. This old man just wants to meet immortal Emperor Go Chan. Why can't I even enter the southern heavenly gate after waiting for so long? This old man has already told all of you. Don't make this old man angry, or you won't be able to bear the consequences. He, the immortal general sneered. You're just a Tao Gate cultivator. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Do you think the master of the Immortal Palace, the supreme cultivator of the human race, is someone you can meet whenever you want? Alright. When Xiaohua heard this, he was truly helpless. He really didn't know who the person who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth was. However, he understood that if he didn't use some methods, who knew what kind of unpleasant words this immortal general who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth would say. Kill! The immortal general roared, and many immortal generals attacked at the same time. Dozens of immortal generals disappeared in the clear light, and the clear light transformed into a blue sky. Hundreds of python-like inscription chains formed a huge golden lock and rushed toward Xiaohua. Behind this golden lock, the southern heavenly gate also produced a ray of light that soared into the sky. A force that could lock the heavens and earth instantly sealed the space around Xiaohua for dozens of miles. If Xiaohua was below the 9th level of elemental power, he might have activated a magic treasure or waved the wishful staff. If Xiaohua had not entered the Star Moon Palace, he might have activated the Hand of Thunder or used his Transcendence Golden Body. However, Xiaohua, who had reached the peak of the 9th level of elemental power and had experienced the law of space in the meteor belt and the resplendent sea of stars in the Star Moon Palace and the law of time in the ghost plane. His use of magic had reached a point where he could do as he pleased. Seeing that the large formation had locked the space around him, he just smiled and stretched out his finger, pointing slightly in front of himself. Pa! There was a crisp sound, and a ball-shaped lightning was born in the space. Then the lightning spread wildly. This spread was not random, but it spread along the flaws of the golden jade heaven lock array. In just the blink of an eye, the lightning shattered all these flaws, and then a wave of cracking sounds could be heard as the space in an area of a few tens of kilometers collapsed. The green heaven goldlock grand formation had been destroyed by a single point of Xiaohua's finger. Not only that, where the lightning passed, It also cleverly triggered the counterforce of the large formation, madly rushing into the bodies of the dozens of immortal generals. Pa pa pa. There was another series of chaotic sounds, and the uncontrollable genuine chi rushed out of the immortal generals' bodies. Not only did it crash into the air, it also hit their immortal armors. While fresh blood gushed out, dozens of the weaker immortal generals withered in mid-air. The leading immortal general was even more seriously injured, and blood was seeping out of his 7 orifices. At this time, no matter how ignorant he was, he knew that he had kicked an iron plate. He looked at Xiao Hua in disbelief, opened his mouth, but could not speak for a long time, because he did not know what to say. He also did not believe that a Taoist cultivator could have such a high cultivation. This old man's name is not on the mysterious yellow proclamation. Xiao Hua looked at the immortal general and said proudly, because the mysterious yellow proclamation does not contain this old man's name. The Fortune Gate's disciples who cleaned the mysterious yellow proclamation are all this old man's disciples and juniors. This old man is the Fortune Gate sect master. Ah? How is this possible? The leading immortal general was dumbfounded, and the group of injured immortal generals were also dumbfounded. Xiao Hua continued, the Lunar Temple's great general Sun Gu was personally defeated and captured by this old man's disciple. And I'm sure you Heavenly King Palace's generals don't know about this, right? That day, not only was Sun Gu captured by this old man's disciple, but also the 28 lunar mansions. The Lunar Temple knew the strength of my Fortune Gate, so they made a bet with your Heavenly King Palace's generals. Only deceived immortal generals like you would dare to come to the Southern Heavenly Gate to stop this old man. Damn it. The immortal general came to his senses, and just as he was about to curse with gritted teeth, he saw a vast aura surging out from within the 5-colored light of the Southern Heavenly Gate, and a voice that sounded like a huge bell rang out, Xiao Hua, you're really something. This king wants to see why the mysterious yellow proclamation does not contain your name. Following this voice, the entire immortal palace suddenly distorted, and even the light that came out of nowhere quickly dimmed. What was strange was that high up in the sky, a black and white dot of light clearly appeared. That black and white dot of light was not the sun and moon, but it was even more powerful than the sun and moon, and in an instant the entire immortal palace's aura was more or less stolen. It was as if the entire space was set off by this black and white dot of light. Immortal Emperor Gaochen? Xiao Hua was shocked, and he raised his head to look at the black and white dot of light. That dot of light had not yet come close, but its aura had already sealed the space around Xiao Hua, and a kind of destructive force, a kind of almost supreme majesty, surged out from within that aura. This aura was so invincible, and in Xiao Hua's knowledge, only the master of the immortal palace could possess it. After a few breaths of time, the black and white dot of light had already formed 2 rays of light. One ray fell from the sky, and its light was blinding, covering the entire sky, and the other came from the ground, and it was incomparably dark, covering the entire ground. Xiao Hua suddenly came to his senses and said in shock, no, this is not immortal Emperor Gaochen. Although this aura is supreme, the will of imperial power is faint, and it is more like the power of a king with an army. If I'm not mistaken, this should be the master of the mysterious yellow token. Sure enough, Xiao Hua looked as far as his eyes could see, and behind the 2 rays of light, a several thousand zhang tall secondary body came whistling over. This secondary body was wearing a Confucian robe, and outside of the Confucian robe was a short armor. The inscriptions on the Confucian robe were overflowing, and the golden light on the short armor was flickering, illuminating half of the sky. Looking at the secondary body's head again, it was wearing a crown, and the auspicious aura on the crown covered the secondary body's appearance. Pictures of battles on the battlefield flashed out from the flowing auspicious aura. Under the crown was not auspicious aura, but 2 rays of light, which were precisely the light and darkness. These 2 rays of light were completely different in color, and they were like 2 huge dragons. Not only were they cruising around the secondary body, but they were also crashing into the surrounding space, landing on the secondary body by a fluke. Wherever the secondary body passed by, space swayed and almost collapsed. Countless majestic pillars of air rushed out from the folds of space and roared as they merged into the secondary body. Layers of dragon roars and tiger roars came from the secondary body's large strides. Hehe. Xiaohua sneered. With a shake of his arms, ka-cha-cha. Rumbling sounds rang out everywhere. Countless lightning-like crystal lights surged out from the void and crazily landed on Xiaohua's body. At the same time, thunderous rumbles came from Xiaohua's body. These thunderous rumbles resonated with the thunderous rumbles, and they shattered the layers of space that were previously sealed by the two rays of light. Just as the space shattered, Xiaohua also transformed into his transcendence golden body that was tens of thousands of feet tall. The golden body was surrounded by lightning, and tiny threads of lightning were like dragons swimming around. They also roared angrily. Inside the shattered space, the majestic southern heavenly gate and the stunned immortal generals all turned into broken mirrors and scattered in the darkness. In the entire space there seemed to only be light and lightning. Roar! The person who came roared, louder than the creation of the world, and the light curtain of the entire space shone brightly. The person who came didn't seem to have any posture, but he suddenly raised his arm. At this time his arm was like a mountain range that floated in the clouds in the sky. This mountain range had two colors. The light was like the mountains that were folded by the sunlight, and the darkness was like an endless abyss. Where the arm landed, the light and darkness fell into the clouds that previously covered the sky. The entire space was suddenly sealed, and the light covered from top to bottom, and the darkness rolled from bottom to top. In the bright clouds, chains of inscriptions entangled and whipped down, and each inscription on each chain gave birth to a different chanting sound. This sound was sonorous and powerful, mighty and domineering, and an unparalleled majesty and spirit fell down. At the same time, countless sounds of weapons and horses rang out like a zither, shattering the space in front of Xiaohua inch by inch. Inscriptions appeared in every inch of space, isolating the heaven and earth yuan qi. In the dark clouds there were also chains of inscriptions, but these chains of inscriptions were different from before. They were all sawtooth, and on the sawtooth of each chain, there was a faint bloody light. Each sawtooth of each chain was also composed of many inscriptions. These inscriptions were dark in color, mixed with the color of blood. These inscriptions also gave birth to chanting sounds, but this sound was flattering and mixed with wailing. An indescribable softness and coldness gushed out, shaking the space under Xiaohua's feet into a sticky, venom-like slurry. Streaks of heaven and earth yuan qi crystals fell into this slurry space and instantly turned into nothingness. Chapter 45-96. Seeing that the entire space had been sealed and all life had been crushed, Xiaohua did not panic at all. He shouted, "Good timing!" Then Xiaohua rubbed his hands together, and streaks of lightning appeared between his hands like flowers blooming. This lightning was different from the lightning that Xiaohua had used in the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm. Not to mention that the Nine Heavens Divine Thunder of the Taoist sect had become more powerful under the Unstoppable Thunderbolt technique. Even the triple light amplifying thunder that the Celestial had used the nine-colored hill to cultivate in the Star Moon Palace flashed with a shocking light. Together with the other four types of lightning, it turned into a nine-colored lightning hand in the sky. As soon as this lightning hand appeared, billions of lightning bolts appeared in the sky. These lightning bolts were sharper than billions of flying swords. They fell into the light and dark clouds, piercing into the inscription chains and inscription teeth. Countless thunderous sounds covered everything in the space. The so-called sounds of pressure and desire all turned into sounds of decadence. The righteousness, majesty, and justice of the lightning enveloped the entire space. Whoosh! The lightning hand fell, and the inscription chains in the light clouds were torn apart. Sections of the chains burst in the lightning bolts, and the inscription teeth in the dark clouds were destroyed. The slurry space and the blood-colored inscriptions were instantly destroyed under the absolute power of life and death. Cracks appeared in the void instead. Ah! The person was slightly stunned and said in surprise, "You are actually so powerful? Who are you? Are all the people in the Immortal Palace nameless?" Xiaohua asked faintly as he activated his Dharma power and blocked the two-colored light with his lightning technique. Haha! The person laughed and also activated his true qi. The light and dark clouds tried their best to destroy the lightning hand. He said, "I am the master of the Tai Ching Palace. I really didn't expect that I would be able to meet a Taoist sect cultivator that I can fight for in my lifetime. Come, let me experience your Taoist sect techniques." As he spoke there was a loud bang. Xiao Hua's lightning hand shattered, turning into tens of thousands of lightning fragments that scattered down. The light and dark clouds that sealed the world were also torn apart by the power of life and death. The entire space was restored to its previous light, and in the distance, the majestic celestial palace was revealed once more. Hearing the person call himself the master of the Taiqing Palace, Xiao Hua sneered. He waved his finger, and a bolt of lightning like a sword pierced through the sky towards the master of the Taiqing Palace. He shouted, "Who's afraid of you? I'll fight you for 300 rounds. Good, good, good." The palace master of the Taiqing Palace called out 3 times in a row. His arm that was like a mountain waved again, as the clouds of light and darkness were activated. Layer upon layer of mountains and seas of books condensed. Not only did they block Xiao Hua's sword of lightning, they even crossed the void and surged towards Xiao Hua. In just half a cup of tea's time, Xiao Hua had already fought with the Grand Purity Palace's master several times. One of them was a newly ascended Mahayana Taoist, while the other was a Confucian cultivator who had been cultivating for many years. The other had a variety of Taoist magic arts, while the other was a Confucian cultivator who had stacked his methods. The other had the unparalleled power of thunder, while the other had the black-yellow vital qi, which was unrivaled in the world. The two of them really fought until the sky fell and the earth cracked and the void shattered. Not only were the spatial hurricanes raging, but the qi of heaven and earth and the Great Spirit were also in chaos. Even in the shattered space, there was an uneven force of space that could destroy any mountain in the world. Looking at the southern heavenly gate, which was originally hidden in the light, it was now shaking greatly. The shadow of light folded and shattered several times. In the end, it barely managed to stand tall in the wild wind. The general of the Heavenly King Palace who rashly challenged Xiao Hua had already lost his soul. He hurriedly commanded his subordinates to activate their true qi, and rushed over to activate the Immortal Palace's defensive formation with the other guards. They did their best to resist the aftermath of the fight between the two supreme cultivators. In another half a cup of tea's time, the aftermath of the fight between Xiao Hua and the master of the Taiqing Palace had already passed through the southern heavenly gate and rushed towards the Immortal Palace. Inside the Immortal Palace, many defensive formations had already been activated. Countless clouds surged. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of immortal soldiers and immortal generals flew over from all directions. They either activated the defensive formations, or set up defenses to prevent enemies from attacking the Immortal Palace. For a time, the immortal soldiers and immortal generals near the southern heavenly gate panicked. Not good, someone is charging into the Immortal Palace. Quick, quick, the 4 great families are attacking the Immortal Palace. No, it's the Taoist cultivators causing havoc in the Heavenly Palace. The immortal soldiers and immortal generals who had not been involved in war for a long time immediately exposed the drawbacks of their comfort. Although they were also setting up defenses and responding, some rumors had already begun to irresponsibly spread. Whether it was intentional or unintentional, they had long concealed the truth of the matter. The originally calm Immortal Palace actually began to become chaotic. Starting from the southern heavenly gate, it quickly spread to other places. Damn it! Sun Jian, who had just patrolled the Flower Medicine Palace, was greatly alarmed when he heard the news. He didn't have time to check if Immortal Emperor Gaochen was in the Flower Medicine Palace. He cursed in a low voice and ordered an immortal soldier to land in front of the Flower Medicine Palace to report the news. He himself waved his 3-pointed, double-edged saber and flew towards the southern heavenly gate with a group of Sun Palace soldiers. Sun Jian had only flown for a short while when another immortal soldier flew over with a message. Sun Jian carefully inquired and his face turned ashen. There was no other reason. There were only a few cultivators in the world who could fight evenly with the master of the Taiqing Palace. And the only one who dared to attack the Immortal Palace was probably Xiao Hua alone. This is bad, this is bad. At this moment Sun Jian was also somewhat alarmed. He stood in midair and frowned as he thought to himself, after all, Master Xiao attacked the Immortal Palace because of the Immortal Palace's attack on the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range. This is all my fault. I promised Master Xiao that I would mediate between them, but... Thinking of this, Sun Jian's frown loosened, and his face became resolute. Since this is caused by me, I can't back down. I'd better hurry to the southern heavenly gate and apologize to Master Xiao. Master Xiao hasn't entered the southern heavenly gate yet. Even if he violates the immortal palace's laws, I'll take responsibility for it. Thinking of this, Sun Jian urged his body to rush towards the southern heavenly gate. At this moment, the immortal soldier beside Sun Jian saw that Sun Jian was hesitating and hurriedly said, "General, you're new here and don't seem to be familiar with the immortal palace's rules. Although the Sun Palace is in charge of the immortal palace's safety, our responsibility lies within the immortal palace. As long as the Taoist sect's Mahayana hasn't attacked the southern heavenly gate, it's not our responsibility. If you force yourself to go now, you'll be inviting trouble. Not only will you bring disaster to the Sun Palace, but you'll also arouse the dissatisfaction of the Heavenly King Palace." "Shut up," Sun Jian said angrily. At this point, the Sun Palace and the Heavenly King Palace are already interdependent. Do you think Master Xiao just wants to see if the southern heavenly gate is sturdy? When Master Xiao kills his way into the southern heavenly gate, it'll be too late for us to stop him. "But," the immortal soldier argued, "General, the Taoist sect's Mahayana is fighting with the master of the Taiqing Palace. Even if you want to, you're powerless. In my opinion, you might as well inform the immortal emperor, or the master of the Jade Pure Palace and the master of the Supreme Pure Palace. This." Hearing the immortal soldier's words, Sun Jian hesitated for a moment. He didn't want to use reporting as an excuse to shirk responsibility, but he was thinking about Xiao Hua's safety. After all, Xiao Hua was fighting with the master of the Supreme Pure Palace. Even if he didn't report to the immortal emperor, the masters of the Jade Pure Palace and the Supreme Pure Palace, they would definitely be attracted by the fight between the two. These three were all literary stars of the immortal palace. If the four of them attacked, Xiao Hua would definitely be defeated. Sun Jian paused for a moment, then turned his head and said, "Go, quickly inform the master of the Literature Palace." "Yes, General." The immortal soldier next to him was startled, then replied in a low voice, "General, aren't we going to inform the other masters of the two pure palaces?" Sun Jian glanced at the flickering light in the distance and replied, "The master of the Supreme Pure Palace is not in the immortal palace. We don't need to inform the master of the Jade Pure Palace. Just inform the master of the Literature Palace, and let him assist the master of the two pure palaces." With that, Sun Jian urged his body to move, not daring to delay any longer. He wanted to stop Xiao Hua from breaking through the southern heavenly gate before immortal Emperor Gaochen and the others arrived. Although Sun Jian's mind was like lightning, his body was still too slow. Before he could fly near the southern heavenly gate, he heard a majestic voice from above the immortal palace, "Audacious Xiao Hua, you actually dare to break through the southern heavenly gate of my immortal palace. What crime do you dare to commit?" Wasn't this the familiar voice of the master of the Jade Pure Palace? Looking at the faint purple clouds covering the sky above the immortal palace, Sun Jian turned pale with fright. He couldn't help but grit his teeth and said, "Damn it, which damned bootlicker actually alarmed the master of the Jade Pure Palace?" At this moment, Sun Jian somewhat understood that there was definitely someone stirring up trouble in the middle. Even if Xiao Hua wanted to break through the southern heavenly gate, the immortal generals or heavenly kings of the Heavenly King Palace who were guarding the gate would definitely inform immortal Emperor Gaochen first. And he was responsible for the defense of the immortal palace, so he would definitely know about this before the immortal emperor did. And at this moment the immortal emperor was clearly in the Medicine Flower Palace, waiting for him to wake up and disturb him. How could the master of the Supreme Pure Palace be one step ahead of Xiao Hua? And the master of the Jade Pure Palace almost never asked about the matters of the immortal palace. If someone didn't specifically inform him today, how could he come out of the Jade Pure Palace? Thinking about how he had been tracking down Sun Hao's master ever since he returned to the immortal palace, all the clues were vague and he couldn't find the source at all. Sun Jian couldn't help but sigh. Previously, when Wen Chu entered the Literature Star Palace, Sun Jian earnestly asked the immortal emperor and Wen Chu to temporarily keep this a secret. Once Wen Chu entered the Literature Star Palace, she would shut the door and refuse all visitors to buy time for him to track down the real culprit. And now that Xiao Hua had caused a ruckus in the immortal palace, Sun Jian himself was clear that he probably wouldn't have the chance to find the real culprit who killed the Black Ruins Mountain garrison and take revenge for them. Chapter 45-97. Before Sun Wu could reach the southern heavenly gate, Sun Jian heard the arrogant voice of the heavenly being outside the southern heavenly gate. "Old man, I didn't accompany fellow Taoist Xiao to the immortal palace to break through your southern heavenly gate. Fellow Taoist Xiao has something to ask your immortal emperor." Fellow Taoist. The lord of the Jade Pure Palace's tone was extremely dignified. Although he sounded amiable, no one dared to underestimate him. "Since we're here, how can we end things without a fight?" Haha. The celestial being laughed even louder. "I understand. Fellow Taoist Xiao is a Taoist cultivator, and you are Confucian cultivators. If you don't measure fellow Taoist Xiao's strength, I'm afraid you won't feel at ease. Moreover, even if fellow Taoist Xiao comes to the immortal palace and has no ill intentions, you all still have to give him a good beating to suppress his arrogance and protect your immortal palace's face. There's no point in saying more." The lord of the Jade Pure Palace's voice was still indifferent. Following that, the rumbling of stars and the rumbling of lightning could be heard. The entire immortal palace began to shake violently again, and countless lights and shadows appeared around Sun Jian. "Go." Sun Jian did not dare to delay. He raised his hand and took out his token, throwing it to the immortal general beside him. "Take my order and inform all the immortal soldiers and immortal generals in the palace to come out and set up defenses." "Yes, General." The immortal general did not dare to delay. He took the token and left. "You all wait." Sun Jian looked around and ordered, "Set up defenses around the southern heavenly gate. You must not let the southern heavenly gate collapse. Do not let the immortal palace's defensive array collapse." "Yes, General." The immortal soldiers and immortal generals received the order and hurriedly left. After Sun Jian finished giving orders, he looked up at the rolling purple clouds above the immortal palace. Sun Jian felt bitter. He knew that he could not participate in such a battle, but he had no other choice. Moving his body, Sun Jian flew toward the southern heaven gate without hesitation. When Sun Jian reached the southern heavenly gate, the entire southern heavenly gate was already filled with immortal soldiers and immortal generals. The space outside the southern heavenly gate was in chaos. Lightning clouds, purple clouds, and sword energy were everywhere. The space shattered and shattered again. The power of space was like a giant hand rubbing it, destroying it over and over again. The immortal palace's immortal generals and immortal generals and immortal generals and immortals were all panicked. They used Qi to protect the southern heavenly gate, and at the same time they used eye clear technique to look outside. And looked outside the gate with disbelief. Their eyes art. Immortal eyes looked and immortal generals and immortal general and immortal generals and immortals and immortals and immortal gate. Immortal gate and immortal. Immortal gate, immortal eyes and immortal gate was generals and immortal general and immortal gate was? Immortal Emperor Go Chan was the master of Immortal Palace, the most powerful character in the world in the eyes of these soldiers. The masters of the four clans might not be weaker than Immortal Emperor Go Chan, but in the eyes of these soldiers there was a huge gap. The only one who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Immortal Emperor Go Chan was the master of the Three Purities Palace. The masters of the Three Purities Palace usually did not show their faces. Most of the immortal soldiers and generals had never seen their faces, and some of them had never even seen the masters of the Three Purities Palace. However, this didn't stop the master of the Three Purities Palace from becoming the pride of the Immortal Palace. However, the fierce battle that had just taken place outside the southern heavenly gate had completely overturned their expectations. None of them had thought that there would be a grand ascension stage human among the Taoist cultivators who had always been hunted and trampled on, who could fight the master of the Three Purities Palace. It was only now that more immortal soldiers and immortal generals heard about Xiao Hua, the profound yellow list, and the fortune gate from others. Everyone. Sun Jian saw that everyone was panicking and said, "The battle outside the southern heavenly gate is exciting, but our duty is to protect the Immortal Palace. Everyone, please focus your energy on the defensive formation and not." Unfortunately, before Sun Jian could finish, an immortal general said coldly, "General Sun, this is the southern heavenly gate, not the southern heavenly gate." Similarly, This is the territory of the Heavenly King Palace, not your Sun Palace. If you were perfected Lord Qing, I would have to bow my head and listen to your orders. You're just the new Sun Palace General. Do you really think you're perfected Lord Qing'an? That's right. The other immortal general also withdrew the clear sight light, and the shock on his face faded a little. He glanced at Sun Jian indifferently and echoed, "This is the Immortal Palace, a place with rules, not the remote village you are in. Nothing can be accomplished without rules, do you know that? You should take care of your Sun Palace and don't stretch your hands too far." Ahem. The general of the Heavenly King Palace who was defeated by Xiaohua coughed and said, "What are you all talking about? General Sun Chou has good intentions. How can I not cooperate with the Heavenly King Palace's subordinates?" General Sun came to help because he was thinking about the Heavenly King Palace. It's better than those bastards from the Lunar Temple who are always scheming against us, right? Yes, yes. The Immortal General smiled and said, "This general is just reminding General Sun to be careful. After all, he's new here and doesn't know the rules of the Immortal Palace. It's fine if we're here, but if he meets those bastards from the Lunar Temple, won't he still suffer a great loss?" If it was before, Sun Jian might have scolded them. However, he had changed his appearance recently and became the great general of the Sun Palace. He saw the other side of the Immortal Palace with his other eye. Previously, he was the relative of the Immortal Emperor. Everyone flattered, followed, and respected him. No one dared to say anything against him. He thought that the entire Immortal Palace was harmonious. Even if it was a bit gloomy, it was just a passing cloud in the wind. But now, his other eye could see the undercurrents of the Immortal Palace better than his third eye. It allowed him to see the strangeness in people's hearts. This gave this outstanding commander a chance to sharpen himself. It could be said that the current Sun Jian was no longer the Sun Jian from before. His gains in this period of time were comparable to the gains of the Heaven Prison for tens of thousands of years. Therefore, Sun Jian smiled faintly and cupped his hands at the immortal generals. "This one has said too much. This one thanks everyone for the reminder. However, this one also wants to remind everyone that you are all immortal generals of the Immortal Palace. You have the duty to protect the Immortal Palace. No matter where you are, you can't forget your duty. Duty has no limits." After saying this, Sun Jian ignored the shock and disdain of the immortal generals and rushed towards the Immortal Palace's defensive formation. "Sun Chou, what are you doing?" The immortal general of the Heaven King Palace was shocked and raised his hand to stop him. "Do you want to die?" Unfortunately, the immortal general's strength was much weaker than Sun Jian's. He had just stretched out his arm when a powerful force stopped him. You. Seeing Sun Jian's cultivation, the immortal general was even more shocked. Because like the other immortal generals, he naturally thought that the so-called Sun Chou was only at the high 6th level of essence energy, or the low 7th level of essence energy. He didn't know that Sun Jian's strength had already surpassed the Heavenly King's. Sun Jian didn't have the time to care about the immortal generals, and rushed into the Immortal Palace's defensive formation. Whoosh! Sun Jian felt the clouds in front of him sway and waves of bone-chilling wind blew over. The defensive armor on his body produced multicolored light that wanted to protect Sun Jian. Unfortunately, the multicolored light just surged out. Pa. There was a series of crisp sounds and the multicolored light was blown into pieces. The inscriptions on the armor were shattered in the wind. Then ka. There was another series of cracking sounds. The defensive armor actually cracked. Roar! Sun Jian didn't dare to be slow. He let out a long roar and in the shattered void, some righteous chi forcefully descended. Sun Jian also activated his child body. Rays of multicolored light surged and turned into 1,000 feet in size. Then Sun Jian waved his three-pointed, double-edged sword and used the eye-clear technique to take a look. Then he flew towards the lightning hand. At this moment, the celestial being was fighting with the Jade Pure Palace Master. When the celestial being activated the celestial being's white bone, he needed Xiaohua's essence energy. When he listened to the discussion in the Star Moon Palace, he obtained the cultivation technique. When he was refining the 10,000 extinguishing celestial dipper, he also integrated the celestial being's white bone into his body. At this moment, he no longer needed Xiaohua's essence energy to activate the white bone at will. However, the vast consciousness in the white bone still couldn't be controlled by him. Fortunately, this consciousness was the same as the heavenly phoenix consciousness in Fengwu's body. If it wasn't at a critical moment, it would also be in a deep sleep and wouldn't interfere. Therefore, when the celestial being activated his 3 heads and 6 arms, the triple radiant lightning on his 6 arms struck down like lightning. He really looked like an ancient thunder god. Looking at the Jade Pure Palace Master again, he had a horsetail whisk in his hand and a purple cloud above his head. As he waved the horsetail whisk, thousands of purple cloud strands appeared out of thin air. Each strand of cloud strands had the power to overturn rivers and seas, and each strand of light could tear space apart. Although the Jade Pure Palace Master wasn't wearing any armor, and was only wearing an emperor's outfit, the purple cloud above his head sent down thousands of layers of purple clouds to protect him. No matter how arrogant the celestial being's triple radiant lightning was, when it struck the purple clouds, it only shook for a moment before disappearing without a trace. Haha! It's indeed refreshing. The celestial being's roar reverberated in the distance. 3 pillars of light of different colors shot out from his 3 heads. Where the pillars of light landed, the void shattered and the purple clouds melted. It was quite powerful. However, when the 3 pillars of light landed on the purple cloud above the Jade Pure Palace Master's head, although the purple cloud shook rapidly, the pillars of light couldn't penetrate it. Boom boom. The celestial being was somewhat enraged. Lightning reappeared on his 6 arms. The lightning was fiercer than a flood dragon, and the lightning was fiercer than a sharp sword. The purple clouds under the Jade Pure Palace Master's horsetail whisk couldn't withstand the lightning's ravaging and shattered. A bright purple light gradually appeared on the horsetail whisk, and layers of inscriptions swam on it like tadpoles. Give it a tip, and thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 4598. As Sun Jian flew through the air, his clear gaze swept across the celestial and pure Jade Palace Master. Seeing that the two were evenly matched, his heart calmed down slightly. Then his figure flashed, wanting to teleport to the side of the battle between Xiaohua and the Tai Ching Palace Master. Unfortunately, he couldn't move at all after activating his true qi. The space around him was shattered, and layers of spatial restrictions overflowed. How could he teleport here? Sun Jian was helpless. He waved his 3-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand, protecting himself as he flew towards Xiaohua. At this time, the Tai Ching Palace Master seemed to be really angry with Xiaohua. His fists and kicks emitted sharp whistling sounds. The light and darkness were already somewhat chaotic, and a dim gray gradually appeared around the Tai Ching Palace Master's body. Not to mention, the Tai Ching Palace Master's crown was already somewhat crooked, and his originally neat armor was also torn to pieces by Xiaohua's thunderous hands. Looking at Xiaohua again, he wasn't much better. Many places on the several thousand feet long golden body were broken, and the 2 colored clouds seemed to stick to it, spreading in all directions from time to time. Good. The Tai Ching Palace Master shouted again, and raised his hand to slap the top of his head. With a loud bang, the 2-colored true qi gushed out like a volcanic eruption, and a 2-colored list flashed with dazzling light as it rushed out. The moment the list appeared, endless propitious qi surged, and the power of the heavenly Tao and the aura of tens of thousands of people instantly filled the entire space. Wherever the propitious qi of the list went, the void that was previously shattered by everyone quickly healed, and a clear qi seeped out from the void. Seeing the leaderboard charge out, the light and darkness that had filled the space earlier converged into the leaderboard like a river flowing into the sea. An even more powerful sealing force surged out from the leaderboard. How could Xiaohua not know that this was the real mysterious yellow leaderboard? He narrowed his eyes, feeling the power of tearing space around him, and whispered, "Profound yellow list? Tai Ching Palace Master, Tai Ching Palace Master." In the distance, Sun Jian saw the Tai Ching Palace Master take out the profound yellow list and couldn't help but become anxious. He waved his 3-pointed, double-edged sword and madly rushed over, shouting, "This matter was caused by this junior. Please calm your anger for now." Sun Cho? The Grand Purity Palace Master was slightly taken aback as he looked at Sun Jian in confusion. Although the Xianhuang proclamation didn't stay still, it paused slightly and only locked onto Xiaohua's aura. What are you doing here?" Xiaohua saw Sun Jian waving his 3-pointed, double-edged blade over. Although Sun Jian's face was unfamiliar, he immediately understood. He smiled and asked, stopping the magic power in his hand, "What about Immortal Emperor Go Chun? Kuai Yu has been reporting for so long, but he still hasn't shown his face." Sun Jian bowed and said, "Dao Master, this matter is all Junior's fault. Junior apologizes to Senior here, and I hope that Senior will not make things worse." "Oh, you. What did you do wrong?" Xiaohua was slightly stunned and asked curiously. This old man only came to the Immortal Palace to ask the Immortal Emperor a question. Sun Jian was also taken aback, but he quickly said respectfully, "I know I'm in the wrong. Although I have already reported to the Immortal Emperor and asked His Majesty to give up the expedition, the decree of the expedition to the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range has not been reviewed by the Immortal Emperor. So, if Senior wants to ask the Immortal Emperor for an explanation, then Junior will bear all responsibility." Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, when he saw Sun Jian's anxious expression, he was moved by his sincerity, and said with a smile, "This matter has nothing to do with you. The matter of the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range has already passed." This old man came to ask the Immortal Emperor about another matter. "Another matter?" Sun Jian was puzzled, and asked curiously, "Senior, what other matter is worthy of such a large mobilization?" "What do you mean by a large mobilization?" Xiaohua sneered. This old man came alone and followed the etiquette to wait outside the southern heavenly gate. Who would have thought that the master of the Xianhuang proclamation would shamelessly come out and ask for a beating? And that Jade Pure Palace master even wanted to win with numbers. Humph. The master of the Tai Ching Palace's expression changed, and a loud rumbling sound came from his body. Boom. At this moment in the distant Immortal Palace, there was a huge tremor, and rays of light rushed over like a torrential river. The rays of light carried endless majesty. Wherever the rays of light passed, the shattered void healed, and the chaotic order of heaven and earth instantly became orderly. Even the awe-inspiring energy and heaven and earth origin energy were orderly. Good. Seeing that the master of the Tai Ching Palace had put away his horsetail whisk, the celestial also felt bored. He looked around and shouted, as expected of the master of the Immortal Palace, "This one admires you." Roar. Wherever the rays of light passed, the roar of a dragon resounded in the sky. Jie. Along with the dragon's roar, the sound of a phoenix's cry also emerged. Between the auspicious appearance of a dragon and a phoenix, thousands of auspicious signs were born in the space. The Immortal Palace that had previously been beaten into a shadow of light actually became full at this moment, and it once again stood tall with an imposing aura. The light and shadow were peaceful, and the sound of music and metal and stone also came. At the end of the auspicious rays of light, an emperor wearing a sun and moon imperial robe and a crown of heaven and earth appeared. This emperor's figure was only 1,000 zhang tall, but in the vicinity of this 1,000 zhang, countless inscriptions surged like flood dragons, and a world-suppressing aura was emitted from this emperor's figure. The rays of light came from the golden throne under the emperor. Layers of golden light fell into the sky, and each wave of rays of light was higher than the last, mightily rushing into the space. Xiaohua stood there and looked at the Immortal Emperor that was much smaller than his golden body, and his eyes narrowed. This emperor's aura condensed together with the golden throne like a monolith. A kind of heavenly Tao-like majesty rushed out from the rays of light, and that monolith's dignified aura caused Xiaohua's heart to thump loudly. This Immortal Emperor is the center of the fate of Confucian cultivators, and the golden throne represents the highest imperial power of Confucian cultivators in the world. Who knows how many generations, how many supreme beings have sat on it? This kind of accumulation is far from what this Xiao can compare to. Seeing Immortal Emperor Gaochen come out, Sun Jian wanted to move over, but looking at Xiaohua and the master of Tai Ching Palace, he hesitated. Seeing Sun Jian like this, Xiaohua's heart moved, and he transmitted a message. "Sun Jian, you still haven't found the mastermind behind Sun Hao?" Sun Jian turned his head somewhat absent-mindedly and said, "I'm afraid I can't. Previously I had some clues, but they were inextricably linked, and I couldn't find the source. Today, this junior must return to his original appearance." "Don't worry." Xiaohua smiled and said, This old man just found out that Sun Hao's master might be related to the Heaven and Earth sect, which is the so-called Tianji Hall. However, this old man doesn't know who exactly it is. Oh, Sun Jian was stunned, and his absent-minded expression immediately disappeared. A trace of clarity appeared in his eyes, and it was replaced by an expression of sudden realization. I see. This junior understands now. Sun Jian transmitted a message. This guy hit too deeply. This junior has some clues here, but it seems that they have nothing to do with him. If senior didn't remind me, this junior definitely wouldn't have thought of it. However, since senior said so, most of the clues have a suitable conclusion. At this point, Sun Jian bowed to the master of Taiqing Palace and said, Master of Taiqing Palace, this is a misunderstanding. Taoist Master Xiao came to the Immortal Palace to explain something to His Majesty the Immortal Emperor. Southern Heavenly Gates Guardian General Qua, you is a general of the Heavenly King Palace. According to this junior's knowledge, he is also a person of the Xianhuang Order. Taoist Master Xiao came to my Immortal Palace, and he didn't report such important news to the Immortal Emperor, but overstepped his authority to report to the Master of Taiqing Palace. This crime is punishable by death. Damn it, do you think you are perfected, Lord Qing? The Master of Taiqing Palace was a bit anxious, and the Xianhuang Order that had stopped was about to fall. Even if this junior isn't perfected, Lord Qing'an, this junior is still a general of the Sun Palace. Even if Qua Yu can't find the Immortal Emperor in the Lingyun Palace, he still has to report this matter to this general. Sun Jian was not moved at all, and replied indifferently, if the Master of Taiqing Palace doesn't want Qua Yu to die, then please wait for the Immortal Emperor's decree. With that, Sun Jian turned and left, no longer paying attention to the Master of Taiqing Palace. Damn it! The Master of Taiqing Palace was furious. No one in this Immortal Palace has ever contradicted this king. Who do you think you are? Haha. Xiaohua laughed loudly. With a swing of his Taoist robe, not only did he shatter the Immortal Emperor's multicolored light, but he also extinguished the ray of light that the Master of Taiqing Palace had shot towards Sun Jian. He laughed and said, there wasn't one in the past, but it doesn't mean that there won't be one in the future. Even if you are a green onion, you have the right. How dare you challenge the self-proclaimed master? Boom! The Master of Taiqing Palace was ashamed and angry. He raised his hand and pointed at the Xianhuang Order. The entire Xianhuang Order suddenly expanded, and two different kinds of light and darkness surged out, destroying the clear light and multicolored light of the Immortal Emperor, and falling towards Xiaohua. Humph! Xiaohua coldly snorted and shouted, the imperial weapon of a Confucian cultivator is only a so-so, and you dare to be arrogant in front of my Dao sect? With that, Xiaohua raised his hand and waved, and a golden light rushed out. The tongue Jiao shears transformed into a golden dragon and pounced on the Xianhuang Order. The dragon's tail swept, tearing the space apart, and the golden light entered the Xianhuang Order in the blink of an eye. Hiss! The Master of Taiqing Palace was shocked and shouted, Tongue Jiao shears? You! How can you have the tongue Jiao shears? Xiaohua was also stunned and looked at the Master of Taiqing Palace in confusion. He didn't understand how the Master of Taiqing Palace knew about the tongue Jiao shears, but he still coldly said, you have the Xianhuang Order, why can't I have the tongue Jiao shears? Shua! With a tearing sound, the tongue Jiao shears cut through the Xianhuang Order. Thousands of inscriptions appeared on the Xianhuang Order, and each of these inscriptions looked like a Confucian cultivator and a general. The tongue Jiao shears were sharp and cut the inscriptions in half, but when it landed on the Xianhuang Order, it was useless. Oh, so it's only half. The Master of Taiqing Palace finally saw it clearly and seemed to be relieved. He smiled and said, if you had the complete tongue Jiao shears, this king might have lost to you. However, if you want to rely on this piece of trash to win against this king, then you must be dreaming. Give it a reward, and thank you for all your support. You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.